The stagecoach door swung open, and Darren Hale's world shattered for the second time in 2 years. The woman stepping down onto the frozen Wyoming dirt wasn't Catherine Miller, the widow with references he'd carefully chosen from 3 dozen letters. This stranger wore Catherine's traveling coat, carried Catherine's carpet bag, but her eyes held secrets that made his jaw clench. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice breaking against the wind. "Catherine couldn't come. I'm Mara Ellison." Behind him, his daughter whimpered. His son's fever burned hotter, and this lying stranger expected him to just, what? Forgive her? If you want to see how this impossible choice tears a broken family apart, or puts it back together, stay until the end. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The Wyoming wind didn't care about Darren Hale's problems. It tore across the Frontier Station platform like it owned the place, scattering dust devils between the hitching posts and rattling the tin roof of the ticket office. Darren stood with his hat pulled low, one hand gripping his daughter's shoulder, the other steadying his son against his hip. Thomas was burning up, had been for 2 days, and little Sarah kept asking when Mama Catherine was coming. Except Mama Catherine wasn't coming. The woman in front of him wasn't Catherine Miller, the 42-year-old widow from Ohio, with the steady handwriting and practical approach to frontier life. This woman was younger, maybe 30, with dark hair escaping a hastily pinned bun and eyes that wouldn't quite meet his. "Say that again." Darren's voice came out flat, controlled. He'd learned that tone in the war. It was the voice you used when everything was falling apart and you needed men to hold the line anyway. "I said, I'm Mara Ellison." She clutched the carpet bag tighter. "Catherine Miller was my employer. She changed her mind about coming west. She gave me her ticket and told you to what? Impersonate her?" The words came out sharper than he intended. Sarah flinched against his leg. "No, I mean, not exactly." Mara's voice was soft but steady, which somehow made it worse. "She knew you needed help with the children. She thought she could send a replacement like I'd ordered a plow blade instead of a wife?" Darren shifted Thomas higher on his hip. The boy was dead weight, too feverish to protest. "Did she tell you I have 2 children? That Thomas here is sick and Sarah hasn't spoken more than 10 words since her mother died? She told me." Mara's gaze finally lifted to meet his, and he saw something there that made him pause. Not defiance exactly, more like resignation. "She told me you were desperate, that you'd written 3 times asking her to come sooner." Heat crept up his neck. Those letters had been desperate, embarrassingly so. The last one had practically begged. "Papa?" Sarah tugged his coat. "Is she staying?" "No." Darren turned toward the wagon without looking back. "She's getting on the next stage east, whenever that is." 3 days, Mara said quietly. "The eastbound doesn't run until Thursday." He stopped walking. 3 days. Thomas needed medicine, needed rest, needed someone who could actually tend him instead of Darren's clumsy attempts at nursing. Sarah needed a mother, but this wasn't the answer. "There's a boarding house in town," he said, still not turning around. "Mrs. Kowalski's. Tell her to put it on my account." "I don't have money for 3 days' board." "I just said, and I don't take charity." Her voice carried an edge now, something underneath that soft exterior. "I came here in good faith, Mr. Hale. I know I'm not who you expected, but I can work. I can help with the children until—" "You lied." He spun around fast enough that Sarah stumbled. He steadied her, kept his voice level. "You got on that stage knowing I was expecting someone else. You let me write letters, make arrangements, all while planning to show up here and what? Hope I'd be desperate enough to accept whoever stepped off." "I didn't plan anything." Mara's composure cracked slightly. "I was working for Catherine. She dismissed me 2 days before her departure, said she'd changed her mind about Wyoming. She gave me the ticket as severance, said it was worth more than the wages she owed me." "So you decided to use it?" "I decided I had nowhere else to go." The words came out raw, honest. "Catherine told me about your children, about your situation. I thought maybe I could help. Maybe that would be enough to—" Thomas coughed against Darren's shoulder, a wet, rattling sound that stopped the argument cold. The boy's small body shook with the effort. "Papa," Sarah whispered, "Thomas is scared." Darren looked down at his daughter's face, pale, frightened, old beyond her 6 years. Then at Thomas, whose eyes had gone glassy with fever. Then at this stranger who'd upended his carefully laid plans. "One night," he heard himself say. "You can stay tonight, help with Thomas. Tomorrow we figure out the rest."
"Mr. Hale, don't!" He started toward the wagon again. "Don't thank me. Don't make promises. Just get in the damn wagon."
The Hale homestead sat 7 miles from town, tucked into a valley where the wind hit slightly less hard. Darren had built the cabin himself after mustering out. Solid logs, tight chinking, a good stone chimney. It had felt like a castle when he'd brought Emily home as a bride. Now it just felt empty. Mara climbed down from the wagon without help, moving carefully in skirts that had clearly seen better days. Up close, in the afternoon light, Darren could see the careful mending on her sleeves, the way her boots were worn nearly through at the heel. Whatever story brought her here, it hadn't been an easy one. "Sarah, take Miss Ellison inside," he said, lifting Thomas from the wagon bed. "Show her where the kitchen is. I need to tend the horses." "It's just Mara." The woman knelt down to Sarah's level, her voice gentle. "What's your name?" Sarah didn't answer, just stared with those huge brown eyes that looked too much like her mother's. "This is Sarah," Darren said shortly. "She doesn't talk much. Sarah, go on." The girl took Mara's hand, which surprised him, and led her toward the cabin. Darren watched them go, then carried Thomas to the barn. The boy needed medicine, needed a cool bath, needed things Darren wasn't sure he could provide, but he'd be damned if he'd show weakness in front of a stranger. He was settling Thomas on a pile of blankets when he heard footsteps behind him. "Mr. Hale?" Mara stood in the barn doorway, backlit by late sun. "Sarah showed me the kitchen. Do you have yarrow? Elderflower? Anything for fever?" "Medicine box is above the stove." He brushed damp hair from Thomas's forehead. The boy's breathing had gone shallow. "There's dried herbs. Emily, my late wife, she kept a stock." Mara nodded and disappeared. Darren heard her footsteps across the yard, heard the cabin door open and close, heard nothing else but wind and his son's labored breathing. "Hang on, Tommy," he murmured. "Just hang on." By the time he carried Thomas inside, Mara had transformed the kitchen. A fire blazed in the stove, water heating in 2 pots. She'd found Emily's herbs and laid out several varieties on the table, along with clean cloth and a basin. "Put him here." She indicated a pallet she'd made near the fire, padded with quilts. "I need to get his fever down before anything else." Darren lowered Thomas onto the pallet, watching as Mara knelt beside him with practiced efficiency. She felt his forehead, his neck, listened to his breathing. "How long has he been like this?" 3 days? Maybe 4? "Has he kept any food down?" "Some broth yesterday." She nodded, already mixing herbs in the basin. "I'll make a tea first, willow bark and elderflower. Then we'll do cool compresses. His fever's high, but it hasn't peaked yet." "You sound like you know what you're doing." "I was a nurse during the war." She didn't look up from her work. "After that, I worked for families with children. Sick children, mostly." Darren absorbed that. "Which side?" "Does it matter?" "No." And it didn't, not really. The war was over, had been for years, but old habits died hard. "I was Union, 7th Cavalry." "I know." Mara glanced up briefly. "Catherine mentioned it in one of her letters." "Right. Catherine. The woman who was supposed to be here instead of this stranger kneeling on his cabin floor, tending his son with hands that moved like she'd done it 1,000 times before." "Papa?" Sarah appeared from the bedroom, rubbing her eyes. She'd been sleeping when they left for town that morning. "Where's Mama Catherine?" Darren opened his mouth, closed it. What the hell was he supposed to say? "Your papa was expecting a different lady," Mara said quietly, her hands never stopping their work. "But I came instead. My name is Mara. Is that all right with you?" Sarah considered this with the seriousness only a 6-year-old could muster. "Are you staying?" "For tonight." "What about tomorrow?" "I don't know yet." "Oh." Sarah moved closer, watching Mara work. "Thomas is sick." "I know, sweetheart. I'm going to help him feel better. Mama used to make him tea when he was sick." "That's what I'm doing now. See?" Mara held up the cup, letting Sarah see the steaming liquid. "It smells a little bitter, but it helps with fever." Sarah nodded solemnly. Then, without warning, she climbed onto the pallet next to Thomas and curled up against him. "Sarah, get off!" Darren started forward. "Let her." Mara's hand on his arm stopped him. Her touch was brief, professional, but it sent an unexpected jolt through him. She needs to be close to him. As long as she's not in the way, it's fine. Darren wanted to argue, but the sight of his daughter's small body pressed against her brother's stopped him. When had he last seen Sarah voluntarily touch anyone? When had she last looked anything other than frightened? "Here," Mara handed him the cup. "Help me get him to drink this." Together, they coaxed small sips of tea into Thomas. The boy fought it at first, turning his head away, but Mara was patient. She sang softly while they worked, some old song Darren half remembered from childhood. After a few minutes, Thomas stopped fighting and drank. "Good boy," Mara murmured. "Just a little more." When the cup was empty, she started the compresses. Cool cloth on his forehead, his wrists, behind his knees. Darren watched her hands move with quiet competence, watched the way she checked and rechecked Thomas's breathing, the way she adjusted Sarah's position without waking her. "You're good at this," he said finally. "I've had practice." She wrung out another cloth. Too much practice. There was a story there, but Darren didn't ask. Instead, he stood and moved to the stove, checking the other pot of water. "There's stew," he said, "from yesterday. I can heat it up." "When did you last eat?" "Yesterday, maybe the day before." "Mr. Hale, it's Darren." He didn't know why he said it. "If you're going to stay the night, calling me Mr. Hale seems foolish." "Darren, then." She adjusted the compress on Thomas's forehead. "You need to eat. I can watch him." "I'm fine." "You're not." Her voice was gentle but firm. "You're exhausted. When did you last sleep?" He didn't answer because they both knew what he'd say. 2 hours here, an hour there, always listening for Thomas's breathing or Sarah's nightmares. "Eat," Mara said. "Then sleep. I'll wake you if anything changes." "I don't—" "Please." She looked up at him then, and he saw it again, that bone-deep weariness that matched his own. "Let me do this much. Let me be useful." Darren wanted to argue, wanted to say he didn't need help, didn't need some stranger coming into his home and rearranging things. But Thomas's breathing had already evened out slightly, and Sarah was sleeping peacefully for the first time in days, and he was so damn tired. "Fine." He ladled stew into a bowl. "But I'm not leaving the room." "I wouldn't expect you to." He ate standing up, watching her work. The stew was cold and congealed, but he barely tasted it. His attention was caught by the way Mara moved, economical, precise, never wasting emotion. She'd rolled up her sleeves, revealing forearms marked with old scars. Burns, maybe. Or something worse. "You said you were a nurse," he said between bites. "During the war. Field hospital. Virginia, mostly." "That where you got those?" He gestured toward her arms. She glanced down, then quickly rolled her sleeves back down. "Some of them." "And the rest?" "Are none of your concern." The words were sharp but not angry, just final. Fair enough. He had his own scars he didn't talk about. They fell into silence after that, broken only by the crackling fire and Thomas's occasional whimper. Mara changed the compresses every few minutes, felt his forehead, checked his breathing. Around midnight, the boy's fever finally broke. Sweat soaked through his nightshirt, and his breathing deepened into real sleep. "There," Mara said softly. "That's what we needed." Darren felt something in his chest loosen. He's going to be all right. The fever's broken. He'll need rest, fluids, proper food. But yes, I think he'll be all right. She said it with such certainty that he almost believed her. "You should sleep now," she added. "I'll stay with him. I can—" "Darren." She looked at him steadily. "You've been running on empty for days, maybe weeks. Let yourself rest. I promise I'll wake you if anything changes." He wanted to argue, but the truth was he could barely stand upright. The adrenaline that had kept him going since Thomas first got sick was draining away, leaving nothing but exhaustion. "The bedroom's through there," he said, gesturing. "You take it. I'll sleep out here." It's not negotiable." He grabbed a blanket from the chest in the corner. "You're a guest in my home. You get the bed." Mara looked like she wanted to argue, but something in his expression must have stopped her. Instead, she nodded and turned back to the children. Darren made himself a pallet near the door and lay down, fully clothed except for his boots. From this angle, he could see Mara sitting by the fire, one hand resting lightly on Thomas's chest, monitoring his breathing. The firelight caught the strands of dark hair that had escaped her bun, turning them copper.
Emily used to sit like that when the children were sick. Patient, watchful, unmovable. The thought came with the familiar stab of grief, but also something else. Something that felt almost like relief? No, that wasn't right. He couldn't be relieved to see another woman in Emily's place, but he was grateful. That much he could admit. He closed his eyes, meaning to rest for just a few minutes, but exhaustion pulled him under like a riptide, and he slept.
Darren woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. For a moment, he didn't move, just lay there in the pre-dawn gray, listening to the sounds of someone moving efficiently around his kitchen, the crackle of grease in the pan, the soft clink of dishes. A woman's voice, humming. For one heartbreaking second, he thought it was Emily. Then reality crashed back. Emily was gone. Thomas had been sick, and there was a stranger in his kitchen, a woman who'd lied her way into his life and somehow made herself indispensable in less than 12 hours. He sat up, running a hand through his hair. Across the room, Sarah and Thomas were curled together on the pallet, both sleeping peacefully. Thomas's color looked better, still pale, but not the gray-white of yesterday. "Good morning." Mara appeared from the kitchen area, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "I hope I didn't wake you. The children were hungry." "What time is it?" "Just past 6. She poured coffee into a tin cup and brought it to him. Thomas's fever stayed down all night. He woke about an hour ago asking for food, which is a good sign. Darren took the coffee, wrapping his hands around the warm cup. "And Sarah?" "Slept through. No nightmares." He absorbed that. Sarah had nightmares almost every night. Had since Emily died. He'd gotten used to her screams, to the way she'd wake up sobbing and inconsolable. "I made breakfast," Mara continued. "Nothing fancy, just bacon and cornbread. I hope that's all right. I found eggs, but I wasn't sure if you were saving them." "No, eggs are fine." He stood, joints protesting. Sleeping on the floor at 43 wasn't the same as sleeping on the floor at 23. "You didn't have to cook." "I wanted to earn my keep. I said you could stay one night, not that you had to work for it." "I know what you said." She met his eyes steadily. "But I'm not in the habit of accepting things without giving something in return." There was pride in that statement, the kind of pride that came from having nothing left but your dignity. Darren sipped his coffee, studying her over the rim of the cup. In the morning light, she looked tired, dark circles under her eyes, hair still escaping its pins, but determined, like she'd made up her mind about something and wouldn't be swayed. "What do you want?" he asked bluntly. "From me, I mean. What's your play here?" "My play?" She blinked, clearly caught off guard. "You got on a stage using someone else's ticket, came to a strange town to meet a man you'd never met. That takes either courage or desperation, and I'm guessing it's more the second than the first." He set down the coffee cup. "So what is it you're running from? Or who?" Mara's expression shuddered. "That's not... It's exactly my business if you're staying under my roof." He kept his voice level but firm. "I have 2 children to protect. I need to know what I'm bringing into their lives." She was quiet for a long moment, hands twisting the dish towel. Then, "His name was Richard Brennan. We were engaged to be married." "What happened?" "He changed his mind." The words came out flat, empty. 3 days before the wedding, he told me he'd reconsidered. Said I wasn't suitable. Suitable for what? For his family, his standing in the community. She looked away. Apparently having a fiancée who'd worked as a field nurse wasn't appropriate for a bank manager. Darren felt anger stir in his gut. "So he threw you over?" "He did more than that." Mara's voice hardened slightly. "He spread word that I'd been inappropriate with soldiers during the war. By the time he was done, no respectable family in Philadelphia would hire me." "That's when you went to work for Catherine Miller." "Yes, she was kinder than most. But when she decided not to come west," Mara shrugged, "I had a choice between using the ticket she gave me or ending up in a workhouse." Darren processed this. It explained the worn boots, the carefully mended dress,
the desperation in her eyes when she'd stepped off that stage. "So you came here hoping I'd be desperate enough to take you anyway." "I came here hoping I could be useful." She met his gaze again. "I'm good with children. I can cook, clean, tend animals, manage a household. I don't need much, just a place to be. And if I say no, if I put you on that stage Thursday," something flickered across her face, fear maybe, or resignation. "Then I'll go. I won't make trouble." "Where? Does it matter?" "Yeah." He surprised himself with the answer. "Yeah, it does." "Why?" "Because he'd spent the night watching you tend my sick son with a gentleness I'd forgotten existed. Because my daughter held your hand without being told to. Because for the first time in 2 years, this cabin felt like something other than a tomb." But he couldn't say any of that. Wouldn't. "Because I'm not in the habit of sending women off to die in workhouses," he said instead. Mara flinched like he'd hit her. "I wouldn't." "Wouldn't you?" He stepped closer, close enough to see the fine lines around her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly. "You said yourself you had nowhere else to go. What exactly do you think happens to women with no money and no references?" She didn't answer, didn't need to. "Papa?" Thomas's voice, small and scratchy, broke the tension. "I'm hungry." Darren turned to see his son sitting up on the pallet, looking pale but alert. Relief flooded through him, so intense it almost hurt. "Hey, Tommy!" He crossed to the boy kneeling beside him. "How do you feel?" "Tired, and my throat hurts." "That's normal after a fever." Mara was there too, her hand on Thomas's forehead. "But your temperature is down. That's good." "Are you the new mama?" Thomas asked, with the blunt curiosity of a 5-year-old. Mara glanced at Darren helplessly. "I'm Mara." "Mama Mara?" "Just Mara, son," Darren said quickly. "She's visiting." "Oh." Thomas looked disappointed. "I thought Papa got us a new mama." "Not yet," Sarah said quietly. She'd woken up at some point and was watching them all with those 2 old eyes. "Papa's still deciding." Darren felt heat creep up his neck. "Sarah, that's not—" "It's true though, isn't it?" His daughter tilted her head. "You're deciding if she gets to stay." Out of the mouths of babes. "How about breakfast?" Mara said brightly, clearly trying to diffuse the situation. "I made extra bacon." The children perked up at that, and the awkward moment passed. But as Darren watched Mara serve his children, watched her cut Thomas's bacon into small pieces without being asked, watched her pour Sarah's milk to exactly the right level, he couldn't escape the feeling that he was standing on the edge of something, a decision that would change everything. 1 month, a voice whispered in the back of his mind. Give her 1 month. It was insane. She was a stranger. She'd lied to get here. He didn't know her, didn't trust her, didn't— "Papa, you're not eating," Sarah said, interrupting his spiral. "I'm not hungry." "You should eat anyway." Mara set a plate in front of him without asking. "You'll need your strength for the chores." There was something almost wifely about the gesture, about the way she'd just assumed he'd eat what she put in front of him. Darren wanted to be annoyed by it, but instead found himself picking up his fork. The bacon was perfect. The cornbread was better than anything he'd made in months. He ate mechanically, aware of Mara watching him from the corner of her eye. "Mr. Hale," she started. "Darren." "Darren, then." She paused, choosing words carefully. "I know you said one night, but if the offer still stands for longer, I'd like to stay." "For how long?" "As long as you'll have me." She looked down at her own untouched plate. "I won't pretend to be something I'm not. I can't replace your wife, but I can help with the children, with the house. I can earn my place here." Darren looked at his children. Thomas was eating slowly but steadily, color returning to his cheeks. Sarah was actually smiling, a small thing, but real. Then he looked at Mara. Really looked at her. Saw the hope warring with fear in her expression, the way she held herself ready for rejection. She'd been discarded before, cast aside by a man who should have protected her. Darren knew what it felt like to fail someone, to be the one left holding the pieces. 1 month, he heard himself say. Trial basis. You help with the children, the house, whatever needs doing, I'll provide room and board. At the end of the month, we'll see. 1 month, Mara repeated, and something in her expression cracked, Not quite hope. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. Thank you.
Don't thank me yet. He stood, grabbing his hat from the peg by the door. I've got fences to mend and stock to tend. Sarah, you help Miss Ellison with whatever she needs. Thomas, you stay in bed until she says otherwise. Yes, Papa, they chorused. He was halfway to the door when Mara's voice stopped him. Darren? He turned. I won't let you down. He wanted to believe her, wanted to think that maybe, just maybe, this desperate gamble might work. But he'd been burned before. Had lost the woman he loved to fever and circumstance and his own inability to save her. We'll see, was all he said. Then he walked out into the cold Wyoming morning, leaving the stranger in his kitchen to pick up the pieces of his broken home. The day passed in a blur of chores. Darren fixed the fence line on the south pasture, checked the cattle, split wood for the winter stores. Physical labor helped quiet the voice in his head that kept asking what the hell he was thinking. When he came back at midday to check on things, he found the cabin transformed. The floors had been swept. Laundry hung on the line outside. Sarah's dresses, Thomas's shirts, his own work clothes all flapping in the wind. Through the window, he could see Mara at the stove, stirring something that smelled like actual food instead of the burnt offerings he'd been producing. Sarah was at the table, carefully drawing on a slate. Thomas sat propped up on the pallet, playing with a set of carved animals Emily had made before she died. They looked content. The sight hit him harder than expected. Darren didn't go inside. Instead, he went back to the barn and worked until his hands bled and his back screamed. Worked until he couldn't think about Mara's careful efficiency or the way his children had taken to her. Worked until the sun started to sink and his stomach reminded him he hadn't eaten since breakfast. When he finally trudged back to the cabin, Mara was waiting on the porch.
Children are asleep, she said quietly. Both of them. I made stew for dinner. It's on the stove if you're hungry. Thank you. She nodded and started to go inside, then paused. Darren? About what I said this morning. Don't. He held up a hand. We agreed on a month. Let's just take it a day at a time. All right. She studied his face in the fading light. But for what it's worth, I meant what I said. I won't let you down. People always mean it, he said, more harshly than intended, right up until they don't. He saw her flinch, saw the hurt flash across her face before she masked it. I'm sorry, he added, softer. That wasn't fair. No, it's... She wrapped her arms around herself. You're right to be cautious. You don't know me. I'm just a stranger who showed up instead of the woman you chose. Yeah. He looked away toward the horizon where the last light was dying. You are. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then Mara moved toward the door. I'll leave you to your dinner. Good night, Darren. Good night. He watched her disappear inside, then stood alone on the porch as darkness fell. 1 month, he'd said. 30 days to see if this impossible situation could somehow work. 30 days to decide if he was brave enough or foolish enough to let someone new into his carefully guarded life. 30 days to figure out if Mara Ellison was his salvation or just another kind of loss waiting to happen. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of coming snow. Darren pulled his coat tighter and went inside to eat his dinner alone, the way he had every night since Emily died. But this time the stew was hot and the cabin was warm, and somewhere in the other room his children slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. It wasn't hope. Not yet. But maybe, just maybe, it was a start. The first week passed in a rhythm Darren hadn't expected. Mara rose before dawn every morning, had coffee ready by the time he stumbled out of the bedroom where he'd reluctantly moved after the third night of sleeping on the floor wrecked his back. She never asked what he wanted for breakfast, just made things, eggs, bacon, flapjacks, and set them in front of him without comment. He ate. She cleaned. The children woke to warm food and a tidy house. It should have felt intrusive. Instead, it just felt easier. Thomas recovered quickly under her care, gaining back the weight he'd lost during his fever. Sarah remained quiet, watchful, but Darren caught her smiling more. Small things. The way Mara braided her hair in the mornings, the songs she hummed while cooking, the stories she told at bedtime. Nothing fancy, just tales about rabbits and foxes that somehow held the children spellbound. Darren kept his distance, did his work,
came in for meals, spoke when necessary, and not much otherwise. But he watched. He watched the way Mara moved through his home like she'd always been there, finding things he'd forgotten existed. Emily's recipe cards, the good tablecloth, a music box that hadn't played in 2 years. He watched her mend Sarah's torn dress without being asked, humming that same tuneless melody. Watched her teach Thomas his letters using a stick in the dirt outside. Watched her scrub floors on her knees until her hands were raw, then hide them in her skirts when she thought he might notice. By the second week, she'd become part of the landscape, as essential and unremarkable as the mountains on the horizon. It bothered him more than he wanted to admit.
Papa. Sarah appeared at his elbow one morning while he was mucking out the barn. Mara wants to know if we have any apples left. Root cellar, why? She's making pie. Darren grunted and went back to his work. 10 minutes later, the smell of baking apples drifted across the yard, and his stomach reminded him that Emily used to make apple pie every Sunday. He stabbed the pitchfork into the hay harder than necessary. That evening, Mara set a perfect pie on the table. Golden crust, steam rising from the vents, cinnamon and sugar coating the edges. The children dove in like starving wolves. Darren took a piece because refusing would have been petty. It tasted exactly like Emily's. "Where'd you learn to make pie like this?" The question came out rougher than intended. Mara looked up, startled. "My mother. She worked in a bakery before she married." "It's good." "Thank you." They ate in silence after that, but Darren felt her watching him, measuring his reaction, trying to figure out if she'd crossed some invisible line. She had, but damned if he knew how to tell her. After dinner, while Mara cleaned up, Darren took the children outside to check the animals. It was part of their routine now, his time with them, away from her constant presence. "Papa?" Thomas tugged his sleeve as they scattered feed for the chickens. "Why don't you like Mara?" The question hit like a gut punch. "What makes you think I don't like her?" "You never smile at her, and you don't talk much." "I don't talk much to anyone, Tommy." "You talk to Mama." Darren's throat tightened. That was different. How? How did you explain to a 5-year-old that talking to his mother had been easy because she'd known him before the war, before he turned into this hard, closed-off version of himself? That Mara was a stranger who'd slipped into Emily's place without permission, and every time he looked at her, he felt guilty for not hating her more? "It just was," he said finally. "Come on, let's check on the cow." But Thomas's words stayed with him. That night, lying in the darkness of the bedroom, Darren stared at the ceiling and tried to remember the last time he'd smiled. Really smiled, not just the tight-lipped acknowledgement he gave when the children did something amusing. He couldn't. The third week brought the first real test. Darren came in from the north pasture to find Sarah in tears and Mara kneeling in front of her, holding a shattered china doll. "What happened?" He directed the question at Sarah, but Mara answered. "It was an accident. She was playing on the porch, and it fell. I've already swept up the pieces." Sarah sobbed harder. "Mama gave me that. Mama gave it to me, and I broke it." The doll had been Emily's as a child. She'd given it to Sarah on her 4th birthday, 2 months before the fever took her. Darren knelt down beside his daughter, his own chest tight. Hey, it's all right." "It's not all right. I broke Mama's doll." Sarah's face was blotchy with tears, snot running from her nose. "Mama's going to be so mad. Mama's not—" The word stuck in his throat. "Sarah, Mama's not here anymore, remember?" "But she gave it to me. She said to take care of it, and I didn't, and now it's broken forever." Mara's face had gone pale. She stood up, backing away. "I'm sorry. I should have been watching her more carefully. I should have—" "It's not your fault." Darren gathered Sarah into his arms, feeling her small body shake with sobs. "These things happen." "I can try to fix it," Mara said quietly. "If you have glue, I might be able to—" "No." The word came out sharper than he meant. "Just leave it." He carried Sarah inside, away from the broken pieces and Mara's stricken expression, held his daughter while she cried herself into hiccuping silence. By the time she fell asleep against his shoulder, an hour had passed and the sun was setting. When he emerged from the bedroom, Mara was at the kitchen table. In front of her lay the pieces of the doll, carefully arranged like a puzzle. She had glue, thread, a needle. Her hands moved with steady precision,
joining fragments back together. I told you to leave it, Darren said. I know. She didn't look up. But she's 6 years old and grieving her mother. If I can give her this one thing back, I'm going to try. You can't fix it. It's broken. Maybe. Mara set down a piece, picked up another. But broken doesn't mean worthless. The words hung in the air between them. Darren wanted to argue, wanted to tell her to stop playing house with his family's memories, but something in her expression stopped him. That same bone-deep weariness he'd seen the first night. The look of someone who knew exactly what broken felt like. He turned away. Don't stay up too late. I won't. But when he woke at 2 in the morning to use the outhouse, lamplight still glowed from the kitchen. He found Mara exactly where he'd left her, surrounded by porcelain fragments and determination. You should sleep, he said from the doorway. She startled, nearly dropping a piece. I'm almost done. Mara, please. She looked at him then, eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. Let me do this. Let me give her something. He understood then. This wasn't about the doll. This was about Mara trying to prove her worth, trying to earn the space she occupied in their lives. You don't have to earn your keep every minute of every day, he said quietly. Don't I? She returned to her work. I'm the woman who showed up instead of the one you wanted, the imposter in your house. If I'm not useful, what am I? You're... He stopped. What was she? Not his wife, not the children's mother, just a woman he'd agreed to let stay for a month because turning her away felt too much like the cruelty men had shown her before. You're tired, he finished lamely, and that doll will still be broken in the morning, whether you sleep or not. I know. But she kept working, and Darren knew she wouldn't stop until she'd done everything she could. He went back to bed but didn't sleep. Just lay there listening to the soft sounds of her moving in the kitchen, putting pieces back together one fragment at a time. By morning, the doll sat on Sarah's pillow. Still cracked, still visibly broken, but whole again in the way that mattered. Sarah's shriek of joy could probably be heard in the next county. Mara fixed it, Papa! Mara fixed it! Darren found his daughter clutching the repaired doll, practically vibrating with happiness. Mara stood nearby, looking like she might collapse at any moment. Did you sleep at all? He asked her. A little. Liar. The corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile. Maybe. Sarah threw her arms around Mara's waist. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Mara's hand came up automatically, stroking Sarah's hair. You're welcome, sweetheart. Something shifted in Darren's chest. Some wall he'd been maintaining cracked just slightly. That was kind of you, he said after Sarah ran off to show Thomas. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. Mara swayed slightly, exhaustion catching up. She misses her mother. I can't bring Emily back, but I could fix the doll. Still, he hesitated. Thank you. You're welcome. They stood in awkward silence. Then Darren did something that surprised them both. He took her elbow, guided her toward the bedroom. You're going to sleep. Now. I'll handle breakfast. But the children? We'll survive burned eggs for one morning. Go. She was too tired to argue. Darren closed the door behind her and turned to find both children staring at him. Is Mara sick? Thomas asked. No, just tired. She was up all night fixing Sarah's doll. All night? Sarah hugged the doll tighter. Really? Really? Papa? Sarah's voice went small. I like Mara. I know you do, honey. Do you like her? Darren looked at his daughter's hopeful face, at Thomas nodding agreement behind her, and felt trapped by his own caution. It's complicated, he said finally. That means no, Thomas translated sadly. It means... Darren scrubbed a hand over his face. It means I'm still figuring things out. Now come on, let's make breakfast before she wakes up and sees what a disaster I am in the kitchen. They managed pancakes that were only slightly charred. Mara emerged around noon looking rumpled and disoriented. What time is it? Past lunch. Sit down. I saved you some bacon. She sat looking around like she'd woken in a stranger's house. The children are fine. Thomas is napping. Sarah's playing outside where I can see her. The washing can wait. But Mara. He set the plate in front of her with more force than necessary. Eat. Rest. Stop trying to do everything every damn minute. She flinched,
I'm sorry, I know. He softened his tone. I know. But you're no good to anyone if you work yourself to death. I'm no good to anyone if I'm not working. That's not true, isn't it? She looked up at him, and he saw it again, that deep well of worthlessness someone had carved into her. I'm here on sufferance, Darren. The moment I stop being useful is the moment you have reason to send me away. That's not... He stopped, because, wasn't it? Hadn't he agreed to let her stay precisely because she could help with the children, the house, all the things he couldn't manage alone? Eat your breakfast, he said instead. We'll talk later. But later came sooner than expected. That afternoon, while Mara was teaching Sarah to knead bread, Thomas came running from the barn. Papa! Papa! Something's wrong with Bessie! Darren dropped the fence post he'd been setting and ran. Bessie was their milk cow, and if something happened to her, they'd lose a critical food source. He found the cow lying on her side, breathing hard. Her belly was distended, and she kept trying to stand but couldn't manage it. Bloat, Mara said from behind him. She'd followed despite his unspoken order to stay with Sarah. She's got bloat. Did she get into the feed? The bin was open this morning. I thought I'd closed it, but damn. He'd been distracted, thinking about Mara's words from the night before. What do? We need to get her up, get her moving. If the gas doesn't pass, her stomach could rupture. Together, they hauled the cow to her feet. Bessie fought them, lowing in distress. It took both of them pulling and pushing, with Sarah watching wide-eyed from the barn door. Walk her, Mara gasped. Keep her moving. They circled the paddock, Darren at Bessie's head, Mara at her side. The cow stumbled and fought, but they kept her upright. After 20 minutes, Darren's arms were shaking and Mara was gasping for breath. This isn't working, he said. Give it time. We don't have time. Look at her. Bessie's eyes were rolling back. Her breathing had gone shallow. There's another way, Mara said, but it's risky. Tell me. We need to pierce her stomach, release the gas manually. I've done it before, on a farm in Virginia, but if we do it wrong, she'll die. Darren looked at his cow, the animal that provided milk for his children, that represented a significant portion of his livelihood, and then at Mara's determined face. Do it. She didn't waste time. Sent Sarah running for a knife, a hollow reed, whiskey. Positioned Bessie where they could hold her still. Darren watched Mara's hands shake as she sterilized the blade, but when she moved, it was with the same steady precision she'd used fixing the doll. She found the spot on Bessie's flank, felt for the right position, then plunged the knife in. Gas hissed out, rank and awful. Bessie bellowed, but Mara kept her hand steady, inserted the reed to keep the hole open, let the pressure release. Hold her, she commanded, and Darren obeyed without question. 5 minutes that felt like hours. Then Bessie's breathing evened out. Her eyes cleared. The distension in her belly decreased visibly. There, Mara said softly. There, girl. You're all right. She removed the reed, pressed cloth to the wound to staunch the bleeding. Darren held the cow steady while Mara worked, stitching with practiced efficiency. When it was done, they both sat back in the dirt, exhausted. That was... Darren shook his head. Where did you learn to do that? Field hospital. We had to treat animals sometimes. The cavalry horses, mostly. She wiped blood from her hands. I wasn't sure I remembered how. You saved her. We saved her. I couldn't have held her alone. They sat in silence, watching Bessie stand on shaky legs and move toward her water trough. Sarah crept closer, eyes huge. Is she going to be okay? Yeah, honey. Darren pulled his daughter close. She's going to be fine. Mara fixed her, like she fixed my doll. Yeah. He looked at Mara, still sitting in the dirt with blood on her dress and exhaustion in every line of her body. She did. That night, after the children were asleep, Darren found Mara on the porch. She'd washed and changed, but he could still see the tremor in her hands. You all right? He asked. I thought I'd forgotten. Her voice was barely audible. It's been so long since I did anything like that. I thought I'd forgotten how. But you didn't. No. She looked at her hands like they belonged to someone else. Muscle memory, I guess. Darren sat down beside her, leaving careful space between them. You said you were a nurse during the war. Yes. That where you learned the rest of it? The herbal remedies, the fever treatments, all of it? Some.
The rest I picked up working for families after." She paused. "Rich families didn't want to hear that their governess used to cut into men to save their lives. So I learned to be quieter about it." "That why Brennan threw you over?" "Because of the nursing." She went very still. "Partly. He didn't like that I'd seen things, done things. He wanted someone proper, untouched by the ugliness of the world. You're better off without him." "Am I?" She turned to look at him, and in the moonlight, her face was stark. "Because from where I'm sitting, his rejection led me here, to a house where I'm tolerated but not wanted, to children who call me mama when their father can barely stand to look at me." "That's not—" "It's true, though." Her voice didn't rise, didn't crack, just stated facts. "You agreed to let me stay because you needed help, not because you wanted me here. And every day, I see you watching me, waiting for me to fail so you have an excuse to send me away. That's not fair." "Isn't it?" She stood, wrapping her arms around herself. "I'm living in your dead wife's house, wearing her apron, using her recipes. And you hate me for it." "I don't hate you. Then what?" She spun to face him. "What do you feel, Darren? Because I can't read you. You don't talk, don't smile, don't give me any indication whether I'm doing this right or wrong. I'm just guessing all the time." He stood too, frustration boiling over. "What do you want me to say? That this is easy? That having you here doesn't mess with my head every single day?" "Why does it mess with your head?" "Because you're not supposed to be here." The words exploded out. "Catherine was supposed to come, someone I chose, someone I'd written to for months. And instead I got you, a stranger who lied her way onto a stage and into my life." "I never lied. I told you exactly who I was. After you'd already gotten here. After you'd already made the decision for me. I made the decision for myself." Her voice hardened. "I had nowhere else to go. And yes, I took a chance that you might be desperate enough or kind enough to let me stay. But I never pretended to be Catherine. I never tried to deceive you. You showed up in her coat, carrying her bag. Because she gave them to me. Because I had nothing else." They faced each other in the darkness, breathing hard. Then Mara's shoulders sagged. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "You're right. I shouldn't have come. I should have—" "Don't." Darren ran a hand through his hair. "Don't apologize. I'm the one being—" He searched for the word. "Unfair. You've been nothing but helpful. The children love you. You saved my son and my cow and probably a dozen other disasters I don't even know about." "But nothing. There's no but." He looked at her, really looked. Saw the woman who'd stayed up all night fixing a broken doll. Who'd plunged a knife into a dying cow without hesitation. Who'd asked for nothing except a place to exist. "You're doing fine, Mara. Better than fine. I'm just afraid," she finished softly. Yeah. The admission cost him. Afraid. Of what? Of getting attached, of letting you matter, of losing someone else I care about. But he couldn't say that, wouldn't. "Doesn't matter," he said instead. "Look, we've got 2 weeks left on the month. Let's just keep going the way we are. No more arguments, no more second guessing. We'll figure it out." "All right." She turned to go inside, then stopped. "Darren, for what it's worth, I'm afraid too." She disappeared into the house before he could respond. Darren stood alone in the darkness, listening to the wind and wondering when exactly he'd started thinking of 1 month as too short. The 4th week came with the first snow. Not much, just a light dusting that turned the prairie white overnight. Sarah shrieked with delight and dragged Thomas outside to make snow angels. Mara watched from the porch, wrapped in a shawl that had been Emily's. Darren tried not to notice how natural she looked there. How right. "We should probably stock up on supplies," Mara said as he headed to the barn. "If this is just the start, we'll need more flour, more sugar, definitely more coffee. I'll go into town tomorrow. I could come with you, help carry things." He hesitated. Taking Mara to town meant people would see her, would ask questions, would make assumptions about what she was doing in his house. "All right," he said before he could talk himself out of it. "But we're leaving early. I want to be back before the roads get worse." They set out at dawn, leaving the children with Mrs. Kowalski, who took one look at Mara and got a gleam in her eye that made Darren deeply uncomfortable. "So this is the mystery woman," Mrs. Kowalski said in her thick Polish accent. The one who came instead of Catherine Miller. This is Mara Ellison, Darren said stiffly. She's helping with the children.
Mm-hmm. Mrs. Kowalski's smile was knowing. Helping is good. Children need a mother's hand. She's not, Darren started.
We should go, Mara interjected smoothly. The roads, you know. In the wagon, Darren kept his eyes on the horses. I'm sorry, Mara said after a while. About Mrs. Kowalski. People are going to talk. Let them. It doesn't bother you. Should it? I just meant... She paused. I don't want to damage your reputation. He almost laughed. My reputation is that I'm a bitter widower who can't take care of his own children. Trust me, you being there only helps. Oh, they rode in silence after that. The town was quiet when they arrived, most people staying inside against the cold. Darren helped Mara down from the wagon, his hands at her waist, and tried not to notice how small she felt, how fragile under all that determination. Inside the general store, Mr. Peterson looked up from his ledger. Darren, and this must be the new missus I've been hearing about. She's not, Darren started. I'm Mara Ellison, Mara said firmly. I'm staying with the Hale family, temporarily. Ah, Peterson's expression said he didn't believe the temporarily part. Well, what can I get you folks? They filled their order, flour, sugar, coffee, salt, dried beans. Mara added things Darren wouldn't have thought of. Molasses for cookies, new fabric for Sarah's dress, penny candy for both children. You don't have to do that, he said quietly. I want to. At the counter, Peterson tallied everything up. That'll be $8.40. Darren pulled out his money, but Mara's hand on his arm stopped him. Wait. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small cloth purse. I'd like to pay for the candy and fabric, if that's all right. Mara, you don't... Please. She looked at him steadily. Let me do this. He nodded, not trusting his voice, watched her count out coins carefully, saw how few remained in her purse afterward. Outside, loading the wagon, he said, You didn't have to spend your money. It wasn't much, and I wanted to contribute something that wasn't just labor. Everything you do is a contribution. She looked surprised by that. Thank you. They were almost home when the storm hit. It came out of nowhere. 1 minute, light snow, the next, a wall of white that swallowed the world. The horses spooked, and Darren fought to keep them steady. Hold on, he shouted over the wind. Mara grabbed the wagon seat, her knuckles white. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in as many seconds. Darren couldn't see the road anymore, could barely see the horses. We need shelter, Mara yelled. There's nothing out here. What about that old line shack, the one you mentioned? Right, the abandoned herder's cabin about half a mile northeast, if he could find it in this mess. Can you handle the reins? I think so. He handed them over, then jumped down to lead the horses by their bridles. The wind tore at him, snow blinding and vicious. But he pushed forward, trusting his sense of direction, praying he wasn't walking them in circles. When the cabin materialized out of the storm, he almost wept with relief. It was barely more than a shack, 1 room, dirt floor, a crude fireplace. But it had walls and a roof, and that was enough. He got the horses into the lean-to attached to the cabin, then helped Mara inside. They were both shaking with cold, snow-caked on their clothes. Fire, Darren managed through chattering teeth. Need fire. But his hands were too numb to work properly. Mara took over, finding the stack of wood left by whoever used this place last, coaxing flames from tinder with fingers that trembled violently. When the fire finally caught, they both collapsed in front of it. The children, Mara gasped. Are they... They're safe. Mrs. Kowalski will keep them. He pulled off his gloves, tried to feel his fingers. This'll blow over. We just have to wait it out. They huddled by the fire as the storm raged outside. The cabin wasn't much, but it kept the worst of the wind off. Slowly, feeling returned to Darren's extremities in painful prickles. Are you hurt? He asked Mara. No, just cold. Come closer to the fire. They shifted positions shoulder to shoulder. The contact sent warmth through him that had nothing to do with the flames. I'm sorry, he said after a while. I should have seen the storm coming. How could you? It came out of nowhere. Still. He stared into the fire. I put you at risk. We're safe now. That's what matters." They fell silent. Outside, the wind howled like something alive. Inside, the fire crackled and popped. "Darren?" Mara's voice was soft. "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah." "Why did you choose Catherine Miller out of all the women who responded to your advertisement?" He was quiet for a moment, remembering. She seemed safe, a widow with grown children. She wasn't looking for romance, just a practical arrangement. I thought that would be easier. Easier than what? Than risking my heart again. Than complicating things, he said aloud. And I complicated things. Yeah. He turned to look at her. Snow had melted in her hair, leaving it damp and curling. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, her eyes bright in the firelight. "You did? I'm sorry." "Don't be." The word surprised him. You're good with the children. Better than I expected. Better than I am most days." "That's not true." "It is." He looked back at the fire. Sarah actually smiles now. Thomas laughs. They haven't done that since Emily died, not really. They just needed time and stability. They needed you. The admission came easier than expected. I'm man enough to admit that. He felt more than saw her turn toward him. "Darren, let me finish." He took a breath. "The month is almost up, and I've been thinking maybe you should stay longer than a month." "How much longer?" "I don't know. As long as you want." He finally met her eyes. "As long as you're willing." Her expression was unreadable. "Why?" "Because the children need you. Because the house runs better with you in it. Because—" He stopped. "Because I'm starting to need you too, and that terrifies me." "Because it makes sense," he finished. Practically speaking, something flickered across her face. Disappointment? But it was gone before he could be sure. "All right," she said quietly. "If you're sure." "I'm sure." "Then I'll stay." They sat in silence after that, so close their shoulders touched, while the storm raged and the fire burned low. And Darren tried not to think about how right it felt to have her beside him, how the fear in his chest was changing into something else entirely, something that felt dangerously close to hope. The storm trapped them in the line shack for 2 days. Not that Darren was counting, or noticing how Mara's hair looked in the morning light that filtered through the gaps in the walls, or the way she hummed while rationing their meager supplies into something resembling meals. He definitely wasn't noticing any of that. By the second morning, the wind had died down enough for them to dig their way out. The world outside was buried under 3 feet of fresh snow, pristine and blinding in the sunlight. "The children," Mara said immediately, already gathering their things. "We'll be fine. Mrs. Kowalski's raised 7 of her own. She knows what she's doing." But Darren was already hitching the horses, anxious to get home despite his reassurances. The ride back took twice as long as usual, the horses struggling through drifts. When they finally pulled into the yard, both children came tearing out of the house, Mrs. Kowalski huffing behind them. "Mama! Papa!" Sarah threw herself at Mara before Darren could even climb down from the wagon. Mama. Not Mara. Mama. Darren saw Mara freeze, saw the way her arms came up automatically to catch Sarah, saw the look of pure longing that crossed her face before she could hide it. "We thought you were dead." Thomas was crying, grabbing at Darren's coat. "The storm came and you didn't come back, and Mrs. Kowalski said you were probably fine, but Sarah had nightmares and I thought, hey. Darren scooped his son up. "We're fine. Just got stuck waiting out the weather. That's all." 2 days, Mrs. Kowalski said, arms crossed. Her expression was knowing. Stuck together, in that old shack. "Nothing happened," Darren said quickly. "I didn't say anything happened," but her smile suggested otherwise. "I'm just glad you're both safe. Children were worried sick." After Mrs. Kowalski left, with a pointed look that made Darren's ears burn, they spent the rest of the day settling back in. The children refused to let either of them out of sight, clinging like burrs. That night, after Sarah and Thomas finally fell asleep, Darren found Mara in the kitchen. She was staring at her hands, that same faraway expression he'd seen a few times before. "You all right?" She startled. "Yes, just thinking." "About?" "Sarah called me Mama today." The words came out quiet, careful, I probably should have corrected her. Why didn't you? Because I wanted to hear it. She looked up at him, vulnerability written across her face. Is that terrible? Wanting someone else's child to call me mama? She's not. He stopped. Emily was gone. These were his children, yes, but they needed a mother, and Mara had been filling that role whether either of them acknowledged it or not. No, it's not terrible, but it's not real either. Mara stood, wrapping her arms around herself. I'm not their mother. I'm just the woman who showed up because no one else wanted me. That's not... It is, though. Her voice didn't rise, didn't crack, just stated facts. Catherine didn't want to come. Richard didn't want to marry me. I'm everyone's second choice, Darren, including yours. The words hit harder than they should have. You're not... I am. You said it yourself in the cabin. You asked me to stay because it makes sense, practically. Not because you want me here, because you need help. What's wrong with that? Nothing. She moved toward the bedroom. Absolutely nothing. I just need to remember what this is, what I am, useful, practical, nothing more. She closed the door before he could respond. Darren stood in the kitchen, her words echoing in his head. He'd thought he was being honest in the cabin, clear about his intentions, but somehow he'd hurt her anyway. The next few days passed in uncomfortable silence. Mara still cooked, cleaned, cared for the children, but something had changed. She was more careful around him, more distant, like she'd built a wall and decided to stay behind it. It drove him crazy. What's wrong with Mara? Sarah asked one morning while Darren was helping her get dressed. Nothing's wrong. She's sad. I can tell. She's just, what? Hurt because he'd reduced her to a transaction? Lonely in a house full of people who needed her but didn't quite know how to want her? She's fine, honey. You should give her flowers, Sarah said with the confidence of a 6-year-old who thought she understood romance. Mama liked flowers. It's winter. There are no flowers. Then give her something else. Something nice. Darren thought about that conversation while he worked. What did Mara even want? She never asked for anything, never complained, just quietly made herself indispensable and then retreated behind that wall of competent efficiency. That evening, while she was putting the children to bed, he dug through the chest in the bedroom, found the box he was looking for buried under old blankets. Inside was a silver locket, Emily's. She'd worn it every day until the fever made her too weak to care about jewelry. Darren hadn't been able to look at it since, but now, holding it in his palm, he thought maybe Mara should have it. As a... what? Thank you? Apology? He didn't know. He was still holding it when Mara emerged from the children's room. They're asleep, she said. Then she saw what was in his hand. Oh, this was Emily's. The words felt clumsy. I thought, maybe you'd want it. Mara went very still. I can't take that. Why not? Because it was hers. It should go to Sarah, when she's older. I have other things for Sarah. He held out the locket. This one, I think Emily would want you to have it. You don't know that. I do, actually. And it was true. Emily had been practical, unsentimental about most things. She would have wanted her jewelry used, not locked away. Please, take it. Mara reached out slowly, took the locket. Her fingers brushed his palm, sending that now familiar jolt through him. Thank you, she whispered. I'll treasure it. It's just a necklace. No. She looked up at him. It's not. They stood close enough that he could smell the soap she used, see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. Close enough that leaning in would be easy, natural. Darren stepped back. You should get some rest. Tomorrow's washing day. Disappointment flickered across her face, there and gone. Right. Good night, Darren. Good night. He lay awake long after she'd gone to bed, wondering why doing the right thing felt so wrong. Winter deepened. The days blurred together. Chores, meals, children's laughter, Mara's quiet presence. Darren found himself watching her more than he should. The way she braided Sarah's hair, how she sang while cooking, the small smiles she got when Thomas said something funny. She wore the locket every day. He tried not to notice. Then one morning, a rider appeared in the yard. Darren didn't recognize him at first. A man in his 30s, well-dressed despite the cold, sitting a good horse. The kind of man who had money and wanted everyone to know it. Can I help you? Darren called from the porch. I'm looking for Mara Ellison. The man's accent was Eastern, educated. I was told she might be here. Behind him, Darren heard the cabin door open, heard Mara's sharp intake of breath. Richard? The name hit Darren like a fist. Richard. The man who'd thrown her over, who'd destroyed her reputation and sent her running west with nothing. Hello, Mara. Brennan dismounted, smooth and confident. You're looking well. What are you doing here? Mara's voice was steady, but Darren could hear the tremor underneath. I came to find you. We need to talk. We have nothing to talk about. I disagree. Brennan smiled, all charm. May we speak privately? No, Darren said before Mara could answer. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of me. Brennan's gaze shifted to him, assessing. And you are? Darren Hale. This is my property. Ah, the widower. Something calculating entered Brennan's expression. I see. Mara, you've landed on your feet after all. Very resourceful. Get off my land, Darren said quietly. I will, after I speak with Mara. She said no. Let him talk. Mara's hand on Darren's arm stopped him. It's fine. I can handle this. Mara, please. She looked at him, and he saw the steel in her spine. I need to do this. Against every instinct, Darren stepped back, but he didn't go far, just leaned against the porch rail, close enough to intervene if needed. Mara descended the steps, keeping distance between herself and Brennan. Say what you came to say. I made a mistake. Brennan's voice was smooth as oil, calling off the wedding, saying those things about you. I was foolish. You were cruel. I was scared. My father was pressuring me to marry someone from our circle. I let that pressure influence my judgment. He took a step closer. But I've realized my mistake. I want you back, Mara. Come home with me. We'll marry. Everything will be as it should have been. Darren felt rage building in his chest. This bastard thought he could just show up and take her after everything he'd done? But Mara laughed, actually laughed. You want me back? Yes. After you told everyone in Philadelphia that I was a whore? After you made sure no respectable family would hire me? After you threw me away like garbage? Her voice was cold now, sharp. You want me back. I told you I made a mistake. No, Richard, you made a choice. And I made mine. I'm not going anywhere with you. Brennan's expression hardened. Don't be stupid, Mara. What do you have here? You're playing house with a grieving widower and his children. Do you honestly think he'll marry you? Make you respectable? That's none of your business. It is if you're wasting your life out here in the middle of nowhere. He gestured at the cabin, the snow-covered land, dismissive. You deserve better than this. I deserve better than you, Mara shot back. I learned that the hard way. Fine. Brennan's mask slipped, showing the ugliness underneath. Stay here. Play nursemaid to another woman's children. But when he gets tired of you, and he will, don't come crying to me. I won't. Mara's voice was rock steady. Because I'd rather freeze in a Wyoming winter than spend another minute in your presence. Now get off this property before I ask Mr. Hale to remove you. Brennan looked at Darren, seemed to reconsider whatever he was about to say. This isn't over. Yes, Mara said. It is. They watched him mount and ride away. When he was gone, Mara's shoulders sagged. She swayed slightly, and Darren caught her elbow. You all right? I will be. But her hands were shaking. I'm sorry. I never thought. I didn't know he'd find me. How did he? I don't know. Maybe Catherine told someone. Maybe. She pressed her hands to her face. It doesn't matter. He's gone. Is he? Darren frowned at the horizon where Brennan had disappeared. He said it wasn't over. He says a lot of things. Most of them lies. She pulled away gently. I should check on the children. They'll want lunch soon. She moved toward the cabin, but Darren caught her hand. Mara, what he said about playing house, about me not marrying you. Don't. She wouldn't meet his eyes. He was just trying to hurt me. It doesn't matter. It does if you think, I don't think anything. She pulled free. You've been clear about what this is. A practical arrangement. I help with the children, you provide shelter. That's all it needs to be. What if I want it to be more?
The words were out before he could stop them. Mara froze, her back to him. What? I said, he took a breath. What if I want more than practical? She turned slowly. Don't. Don't say things like that because you feel sorry for me, or because Richard showed up and made you feel protective. I don't need pity. It's not pity. Then what is it? Darren looked at her, really looked. Saw the woman who'd stayed up all night fixing a broken doll, who'd saved his son and his cow, who'd made his house feel like a home again, who wore his dead wife's locket and somehow made it seem right instead of wrong. I don't know, he admitted, but it's not pity. Darren! Papa! Mara! Sarah's voice cut through the moment. She was standing in the doorway, Thomas behind her. What's wrong? Who was that man? No one important, Mara said, her voice smoothing back to normal. Just someone asking for directions. He made you upset, Thomas observed. We could see from the window. I'm fine, sweetheart. Mara climbed the steps, gathering both children close. Everything's fine. But it wasn't fine. Darren could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hand still trembled slightly when she touched the children's hair. That night, after the children were asleep, Darren knocked on the bedroom door. Come in. He found Mara sitting on the bed, the locket open in her hands. Inside were two tiny portraits, Emily on one side, a stranger on the other. Who's that? Darren asked, pointing to the stranger. My mother. Emily's portrait was already here, but the other side was empty. I had a daguerreotype of my mother in my bag. I cut it down to fit. She looked up at him. I hope that's all right. Of course. I just thought, if I'm going to wear it, it should have meaning for me too, not just borrowed significance. Darren sat on the edge of the bed, careful to keep distance between them. Tell me about her. Your mother. She died when I was 12. Consumption. My father followed a year later. His heart just gave out. Mara traced the tiny portrait. She was kind, patient, everything I try to be and usually fail at. You don't fail. I do, more than you know. She closed the locket. Today, when Richard showed up, I wanted to scream at him, rage, make him hurt the way he hurt me. But I didn't, because the children were watching and I had to be calm. Had to be... She laughed bitterly. Useful. You were brave. I was scared. Bravery is being scared and doing it anyway. He shifted closer. For what it's worth, I wanted to throw him off my land myself, preferably over a cliff. That got a small smile. That would have been satisfying. He's wrong, you know, about what he said. Which part? All of it, but especially the part about you wasting your life here. Darren made himself meet her eyes. You're not wasting anything. The children are happier than they've been in years. The house runs smoothly. He stopped. Even you're what? Less broken, he admitted, than I was before you came. Mara's expression softened. Darren, I mean it. I don't know what this is between us. I don't know if it's just gratitude or something else, but it's real. It matters. To the children. To me. The words hung in the air. Mara looked down at the locket in her hands, then back up at him. What are you saying? I'm saying... He took a breath. I'm saying maybe we should make this official, not just you staying on as help, but as... A crash from outside cut him off. Darren was on his feet instantly, grabbing the rifle from beside the door. Stay with the children. What is it? I don't know. He stepped onto the porch. The moon was bright enough to see clearly. The barn door hung open, swinging in the wind, and there, leading Bessie toward the tree line, was a figure on horseback. Richard Brennan. Rage flooded through Darren. He raised the rifle, fired a warning shot over Brennan's head. Let go of that cow! Brennan wheeled his horse around. In the moonlight, Darren could see his sneer. Consider it payment for my trouble, coming all this way for nothing. You son of a... Another shot rang out, but not from Darren's rifle. Mara stood on the porch, Emily's old pistol in her hands, smoke curling from the barrel. Her shot had hit the ground right in front of Brennan's horse, making the animal rear. The next one goes through you, she said calmly. Leave, now. Brennan fought his panicked horse, finally getting it under control. He dropped Bessie's lead rope. You're insane, he spat. No, I'm done. Mara's hands didn't shake. I'm done being afraid of you, done letting you control any part of my life. Leave now, or I will shoot you and sleep just fine tonight. For a moment, no one moved. Then Brennan spurred his horse and rode away, disappearing into the darkness. Darren took the pistol gently from Mara's hands. They were trembling now, the adrenaline catching up. Where'd you learn to shoot? Field hospital. Her voice shook. We had to protect ourselves sometimes. From deserters, raiders. You would have actually shot him. Yes. She looked up at him, eyes fierce. I'm tired of running, tired of being the victim. He was stealing from you, from the children. I couldn't just... Her voice cracked. Darren pulled her close without thinking. She stiffened, then melted against him, shaking. It's all right, he murmured. You're all right. He's gone. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have... You saved our cow, and probably our lives. He seemed desperate enough for anything. They stood like that, wrapped together in the cold. Slowly, Mara's shaking subsided. She pulled back slightly, looking up at him. What were you going to say? Before. In the bedroom. Darren looked down at her. This woman who'd shot at a man to protect his property, who wore his wife's locket like it was precious, who'd somehow become essential to everything he was. And he knew what he should say, knew he should step back, maintain distance, protect his heart. But fear was a cold companion, and Mara was warm and alive in his arms. I was going to say we should get married, he said. Make this real, not just for the children, for us. Mara's eyes widened. Darren, I know it's fast. I know you've got every reason to say no, but no. Her voice was flat. I can't. The rejection hit harder than he expected. Why not? Because you're asking out of gratitude or guilt, or because Richard showed up and made you feel protective. She pulled out of his arms. I won't be anyone's pity marriage, Darren. I've been the wrong choice too many times. You're not the wrong choice. Then why now? Her voice rose slightly. Why after 2 months of keeping me at arm's length? Why after barely speaking to me unless necessary? Because another man showed up and suddenly I'm worth claiming? That's not... It is. Tears shone in her eyes. You said it yourself. Practical. Useful. That's all I am to you. And maybe that's enough for some people, but She pressed a hand to her mouth. I can't do it. I can't marry someone who doesn't actually want me. I do want you. You want help with the children. That's not the same thing. Darren felt his own temper rising. So what do you want? Poetry? Romance? I'm a widower with 2 children and a failing ranch. I don't have anything else to offer. I want someone who chooses me first. Her voice broke. Not because I'm convenient, not because I showed up when no one else would, but because they actually want me in their life. And you don't. You've made that clear every day since I got here. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, Darren. I learned that when the man I loved told everyone I was a whore, when Catherine threw me away, when I showed up here and you looked at me like I was a problem to solve. She wrapped her arms around herself. I'm tired of being the solution to other people's problems. Just once, I want to be the answer to someone's question. What question? Who do you love? Tears spilled down her cheeks. And the answer sure as hell isn't Mara, because she's useful. She turned and went inside, closing the door firmly behind her. Darren stood alone in the moonlight, his proposal hanging in the air like smoke. Inside, he could hear Mara moving around, checking on the children, her footsteps careful and quiet. He'd thought he was doing the right thing, offering marriage, making things official. But somehow, he'd managed to hurt her worse than Brennan had, because Brennan was a bastard who'd shown his true colors. But Darren? Darren was supposed to be better than that. He secured Bessie back in the barn, checked all the locks, then sat on the porch until dawn broke. Thinking about Mara's words, about the truth buried in them. She was right. He had been keeping her at arm's length, had been treating her like hired help rather than what? What did he actually feel? The honest answer scared him. When he finally went inside, the sun was up and Mara was making breakfast like nothing had happened. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. Her movements were efficient, practiced, emotionless. Coffee's ready, she said without looking at him. Mara? The children will be up soon. We should eat before they wake. We need to talk about last night. No. She set a plate in front of him. We really don't. I didn't mean to hurt you. I know. She finally looked at him. But you did anyway. Because you're right. I want things you can't give. Things you probably shouldn't give. So let's just forget it happened. I can't forget, then pretend. Her voice was sharp. Pretend for the children. Pretend for me. Because I can't leave, Darren. I have nowhere else to go. So I'm going to stay here and be useful and practical, and you're going to let me. And we're both going to pretend last night never happened. That's not what I want. Then what do you want? She threw the dish towel down, frustration finally breaking through. Because I don't know anymore. I don't know what you want from me. Help with the children? A housekeeper? A wife in name only? Tell me what you want so I can try to be it. I want... The word stuck in his throat. I want you to stay. I'm staying. I want you to be happy here. I'll manage. I want... He stopped, looked at her. Really looked. Saw the exhaustion, the heartbreak, the walls she was building brick by brick. I want to not screw this up any worse than I already have. Something softened in her expression. Then give me space, please. Just let me figure out how to do this without it breaking me. All right? The agreement cost him. But Mara? For what it's worth, I meant what I said about the proposal. I know you did. She picked up the dish towel, went back to work. That's what makes it worse. The children woke then, tumbling into the kitchen with their usual chaos. Darren watched Mara transform, saw her paste on a smile, become the cheerful, patient woman they needed, saw her bury everything real beneath layers of performance. And he realized with sickening clarity that he'd done this to her. Taken someone genuine and forced her to become a shadow, useful, practical, nothing more. Later, while Mara was teaching Sarah to sew, Darren found Thomas in the barn. Can I ask you something, Tommy? Sure, Papa. Do you like having Mara here? Thomas looked up from the toy horse he was playing with. Of course. She's nice. She makes good food. And she doesn't get mad when I'm loud. Do you want her to stay? Forever, I mean. You mean marry her? Kids, too smart for their own good. Yeah. Thomas considered this seriously. Would she be our new mama? If she stayed, yes. Would you be happy? The question caught him off guard. What? You're always sad, Papa, since Mama Emily died. Would Mara make you happy? Darren knelt down to his son's level. I don't know, buddy. Maybe. Then you should marry her. Thomas said it like it was obvious. Sarah and me like her. You like her. That's what marriage is, right? It's more complicated than that. Why? Because I'm scared. Because I lost your mother and it nearly destroyed me. Because letting Mara matter means risking that pain again. Because grown-ups make things complicated, Darren said instead. That's dumb. Yeah. He ruffled his son's hair. Yeah, it is. That night, lying in his bed while Mara slept in the room that had become hers, Darren stared at the ceiling and faced the truth he'd been avoiding. He was falling for her. Maybe had been since that first night when she'd tended Thomas with such gentle competence. Definitely since the storm, when they'd huddled together and he'd realized he didn't want to let her go. But falling for someone meant vulnerability, meant risking loss. And Darren had already lost so much. The question was whether he was brave enough to risk losing more, or whether he'd let fear turn him into the kind of man who destroyed something good before it could destroy him first. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, the house was silent except for the creak of old wood and his own troubled thoughts. And somewhere in the darkness, Mara lay awake in her borrowed room, wearing a dead woman's locket, and wondered if she'd ever be anyone's first choice. The answer, for now, seemed to be no. And that truth hurt worse than any rejection Richard Brennan could have delivered. 3 weeks crawled by like wounded animals. Mara stayed. Darren had known she would. She'd said it herself. She had nowhere else to go. But the woman who moved through his house now was a ghost of the one who'd fixed Sarah's doll and saved Bessie's life. She cooked, cleaned, cared for the children with the same gentle efficiency. But the songs stopped. The smiles became mechanical, and she never, ever met his eyes unless absolutely necessary.
It was like living with a well-trained servant instead of a person. The children noticed. "Why doesn't Mara sing anymore?" Sarah asked one morning while Darren was braiding her hair, badly because Mara had taken to waking before dawn and disappearing into chores before anyone else stirred. "I don't know, honey." "Did we do something wrong?" "No, of course not." "Then why is she sad?" Darren's hand stilled in his daughter's hair. "What makes you think she's sad?" "She cries at night. I can hear her through the wall." Sarah turned to look at him with those two knowing eyes. "You made her sad, didn't you?" The accusation hit like a slap. "Sarah, Thomas says you asked her to marry you and she said no, but I think you asked wrong. That's why she's sad." "It's complicated." "That's what grown-ups always say when they mess up." Sarah pulled away, her braid half finished and lopsided. "You should fix it, Papa, before she goes away like Mama Emily did." She ran off before he could respond, leaving Darren alone with the uncomfortable truth that his 6-year-old understood the situation better than he did. That afternoon, while Mara was hanging laundry, Mrs. Kowalski arrived unannounced with a basket of preserves. "Don't look so worried," she said, bustling past Darren into the kitchen. "I'm not here to meddle, just bringing jam." "Uh-huh." Although, she glanced out the window where Mara was working, movements sharp and efficient. That girl looks like she's trying to work herself into an early grave. "She's fine." "She's miserable." Mrs. Kowalski set down the basket. "And so are you. What happened?" "Nothing happened." Darren Hale, "I've known you since you were barely older than Thomas. Don't lie to me." She crossed her arms. "You did something stupid, didn't you?" "I asked her to marry me." "And?" "She said no." Mrs. Kowalski's expression softened. "Ah, why?" "Because she thinks I'm only asking out of obligation, or gratitude, or—" He ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know, because I'm an idiot who can't say what he means." "Did you tell her you love her?" The question hung in the air. Darren stared at the older woman, mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. That's not— You didn't." Mrs. Kowalski shook her head. "Men, you asked her to marry you without telling her you love her?" "I don't—" He stopped. Did he? Love her? The word felt too big, too dangerous. "It's too soon for that." "Is it? You've been living together for 3 months. She's been mothering your children, running your household, probably keeping you from falling apart even when you don't notice. How much longer do you need?" "Emily's only been gone 2 years. And she'd be furious with you right now." Mrs. Kowalski's voice gentled. "Emily was practical. She wouldn't want you pining forever. She'd want you to be happy. Want the children to have a mother. That's what I'm trying to do. I asked Mara to marry me. For the wrong reasons. You asked her to be useful, to fill a role, not to be your wife." She poked him in the chest. "That girl has been thrown away by everyone in her life. She doesn't need another man who sees her as a convenience. She needs someone who sees her as a person, as a woman worth choosing." "I do see her." "Then tell her. Stop being a coward and tell her." Mrs. Kowalski grabbed her basket. "Before she realizes she deserves better than a man too scared to admit what he feels." She left in a whirlwind of skirts and pointed looks. Darren stood in his kitchen, her words ringing in his ears. That night he tried to talk to Mara, caught her in the kitchen after the children were asleep. "We need to discuss something. If it's about the flower order, I already— It's not about flower." He took a breath. "It's about us. About what I said before." Her hand stilled on the dish she was drying. "I thought we agreed to forget that." "You agreed?" "I never did." "Darren, please." Her voice was tired. "I can't do this again. Just listen. When I asked you to marry me, I did it wrong. I know that now, but the offer still stands, and I—" "Stop." She set down the dish with shaking hands. "Just stop. You don't have to keep doing this." "Doing what?" "Trying to fix things. Trying to make me feel better about being here." She finally looked at him, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I know what I am to you. I know my place. I don't need you to pretend there's more to it than there is." "I'm not pretending." "Then what are you doing?" Her voice rose. "Because from where I'm standing, you're a man who feels guilty, who thinks he hurt me, which you did, and is trying to make it right. But
I don't need your guilt, Darren. I don't need your pity. I need... She stopped, biting her lip hard. What? He moved closer. What do you need? Nothing you can give me. She turned away. I'm going to bed. Good night. Mara, please, just let it go. She left him standing there, and Darren felt something crack in his chest. This wasn't working. Whatever he was doing, it was making things worse. The next morning, he woke to find Mara's carpet bag by the door. Panic seized him. He found her in the kitchen, already dressed in her traveling clothes, the same worn dress she'd arrived in 3 months ago. What are you doing? The stage comes through town tomorrow. Her voice was calm, practiced. I thought I'd stay with Mrs. Kowalski tonight. Make an early start. You're leaving. Yes. Why? She looked at him then, really looked, and he saw exhaustion in every line of her face. Because I can't do this anymore. I can't live in this house, take care of your children, and pretend my heart isn't breaking every single day. Then don't pretend. Stay. We'll figure it out. There's nothing to figure out. Her composure cracked. You don't love me, Darren. You like what I do for you. You appreciate the help. Maybe you even care about me in some distant, grateful way. But you don't love me, and I can't spend the rest of my life waiting for you to look at me the way you looked at Emily. That's not fair. Emily is dead. I know she's dead. I know I'm the replacement, the second choice, the woman who showed up because no one else wanted to. Tears spilled down her cheeks. But I'm so tired of being second, of being almost enough. I'd rather be alone than be someone's consolation prize. You're not... I am. She wiped her eyes roughly. And it's not your fault. You've been honest about what you want. I'm the one who started wanting more. That's on me. Mara, please. I've already told the children I'm leaving. Sarah cried. Thomas asked if it was because he was bad. Her voice broke. I told them no. Told them I had family out east who needed me. They didn't believe me, but what was I supposed to say? That I'm leaving because I'm in love with their father and he doesn't love me back? The words hung between them like smoke. In love with their father. She'd said it, actually said it out loud. Darren's brain seemed to stall, unable to process. You... what? Forget it. Mara grabbed her bag. I shouldn't have said that. I'll be gone within the hour. You won't have to... He kissed her. Didn't think about it, didn't plan it, just closed the distance between them and pressed his mouth to hers. She went rigid with shock, her bag hitting the floor with a thud. For a moment, nothing moved. Then Mara made a small sound, half sob, half something else, and kissed him back. It wasn't smooth. Their noses bumped. Their teeth clicked together. Darren's hands found her waist and held on like she might disappear if he let go. Mara's fingers twisted in his shirt, pulling him closer even as tears continued to stream down her face. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Darren kept his forehead pressed to hers. Don't go, he whispered. Please don't go. Why? Her voice was raw. Give me one good reason. Because I'm an idiot who's been lying to himself for 3 months. Because I'm scared out of my mind. Because every time I look at you, I feel guilty for wanting someone who isn't Emily. He pulled back enough to see her face. But I do want you, not as help, not as a replacement, as you, as Mara. The woman who fixed my son's doll at 3 a.m, who saved my cow, who makes terrible coffee but perfect pie, who shoots at men who threaten her family, your family, our family. He cupped her face in his hands. That's what we are now, whether I was ready to admit it or not. You and me and 2 children who call you mama because that's what you are to them. Darren, I love you. The words came out rough, unpracticed, but true. I love you, and I'm sorry it took me this long to say it. Sorry I made you feel like second choice. Sorry I was too much of a coward to admit what I felt until you were literally walking out the door. Mara's eyes searched his face. You love me. Yes. Not because I'm useful? No. Not because I'm convenient? Mara, you're the least convenient thing that's ever happened to me. He almost smiled. You showed up when I wasn't ready, made me feel things I'd sworn off, turned my orderly life completely upside down. You're complicated and stubborn, and you make me crazy. That doesn't sound like love. It is, though. He kissed her forehead, her cheek, the corner of her mouth. It's messy and terrifying and nothing like what I had with Emily. But it's real, it's mine, it's ours. She was crying again, but softer now. I love you too, in case that wasn't clear. It wasn't. I'm a little slow. A little? All right, a lot. He brushed tears from her cheeks. Stay, please. Not as hired help, as my wife, my partner, the woman I choose every single day. I already said I'd marry you. No, I asked, and you said no because I asked like an idiot, so I'm asking again. He dropped to one knee right there in the kitchen, still holding her hands. Mara Ellison, will you marry me? Not because I need help with the children or the house, not because it's practical or convenient, but because I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you every single day. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. That's better. Is that a yes? It's a yes. He stood, pulled her close, kissed her properly this time. Slower, sweeter, full of promise instead of desperation. When they finally pulled apart, Sarah and Thomas were standing in the doorway. Does this mean Mara's staying? Sarah asked. Yeah, honey. Darren kept one arm around Mara's waist. She's staying. Forever. Forever. Sarah whooped and launched herself at them both. Thomas followed, and suddenly they were a tangle of arms and laughter and happy tears. Can we call you Mama now? Thomas asked, looking up at Mara. For real? Mara's voice caught. If you want to. We want to, Sarah said firmly. Right, Tommy? Right. Then yes. Mara knelt down to their level, pulling both children close. You can call me Mama. Darren watched his family, because that's what they were now, a real family, and felt something settle in his chest. The fear was still there. The grief over Emily would probably never fully fade, but underneath it all was something stronger. Hope. Later, after the children finally calmed down enough to eat breakfast, Mara found her carpet bag still sitting by the door. I should unpack this. Leave it, Darren caught her hand. Actually, there's something I need to show you first. He led her outside, across the yard to a small fenced area behind the barn. Inside was a headstone, simple, weathered, marked with Emily's name and dates. Mara's hand tightened on his. Darren, I need to do this. He took a breath. I need to say it out loud, to her, with you here. He approached the grave, Mara beside him. For a long moment, he just stood there, looking at the name carved in stone. I loved you, he said finally. I'll always love you. You gave me those 2 beautiful children, gave me 5 good years, taught me what it meant to build a life with someone. His voice roughened. But you're gone, and I'm still here. And I need to let you go now. Not forget you, never forget you, but let you go. Mara's hand found his, squeezed. I'm going to marry Mara, he continued. She's good to the children, good to me. She's nothing like you, which is probably for the best. She's her own person. Stubborn, strong, brave in ways I'm still discovering. He paused. I think you'd like her. I think you'd tell me I'm an idiot for almost letting her leave. And you'd be right. Mara let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. I hope... Darren's throat closed. I hope, wherever you are, you understand. I hope you're not angry. I hope... She's not angry. Mara's voice was soft but certain. She wants you to be happy, to move on, to live. How do you know? Because I would want the same thing, if our places were reversed. She turned to face him. Emily loved you. That doesn't end just because she's gone. But love doesn't mean holding on forever. Sometimes it means letting go. Darren pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. They stood like that for a long time, in front of Emily's grave while the wind whispered through the prairie grass. Finally, Mara spoke again. Can I say something to her? Of course. Mara approached the headstone, one hand resting lightly on top. I'll take care of them. Your children, your husband. I'll love them the best I can. I won't try to replace you. No one could. But I'll be here. I'll stay. I promise. Darren watched her make that vow to a woman she'd never met, and felt the last of his resistance crumble. This was right. It wasn't what he'd planned, wasn't what he'd expected, but it was right. They walked back to the house hand in hand. Inside, Sarah had found paper and was drawing furiously.
What are you making, honey? Mara asked. A picture. For your wedding. Can I see? Sarah held it up proudly. It showed 4 stick figures, Darren tall and stern, Mara in a dress, Sarah and Thomas between them, all holding hands. Above them, Sarah had drawn a yellow sun and written in careful letters, Our family. It's perfect, Mara whispered. That night, after the children were finally asleep, overexcited by the prospect of a wedding, Darren found Mara in the kitchen. She'd changed into her nightdress but was still wearing the locket. Can't sleep? He asked. Too much to think about. She touched the locket. I should probably replace Emily's portrait. It doesn't seem right to... Leave it. He came up behind her, rested his hands on her shoulders. She's part of our story, part of what brought us here. You mean that? Yeah. He turned her to face him. The past doesn't have to be erased to make room for the future. We can honor what was while building what is. When did you get so wise? About 5 hours ago. He kissed her forehead. I'm a quick learner. She leaned into him, fitting against his chest like she'd always belonged there. What happens now? Now? He considered. We get married, raise the children, build a life together, fight occasionally because we're both stubborn, make up because we're both terrible at staying mad. Sounds complicated. Probably will be. Good. She tilted her face up. I'm tired of simple. Simple is how you end up alone. He kissed her then, slow and deep, tasting salt from earlier tears and something sweeter underneath. Promise. Maybe. Or just the simple truth that they'd both found something worth fighting for. When they pulled apart, Mara rested her head against his chest. I was really going to leave, this morning. I had the ticket money saved. Had a plan. Where were you going to go? I don't know. West, maybe, California. Somewhere no one knew me. She laughed softly. Probably would have ended up working as a nurse again. Or a governess. Back where I started. I'm glad you didn't. Me too. She pulled back to look at him. Thank you for stopping me. For saying what you should have said weeks ago. Thank you for staying long enough to hear it. They stood like that, wrapped in each other, until the fire burned low and the house grew cold. Then Darren walked her to her bedroom door. Good night, Mara. Good night. She hesitated. Darren? How long should we wait? Before the wedding? How long do you want to wait? Not long. She smiled, shy and certain at once. I've spent too much of my life waiting already. Next week, then. We'll go to town, find the circuit preacher, make it official. Next week. She leaned up, kissed him softly. I can wait a week. She slipped into her room, closed the door. Darren stood there for a moment, then went to check on the children one last time. Thomas was sprawled across his bed, arms flung wide. Sarah was curled around her repaired doll, one hand clutching the toy like a lifeline. They both looked peaceful, happy. He thought about Sarah's drawing, our family, 4 stick figures holding hands. It had been 3 of them for so long. Him and the children, incomplete and struggling. Now it would be 4. A real family again, even if it looked different from before. In his own room, Darren lay awake thinking about the future, about Mara in a wedding dress, about waking up next to her every morning, about growing old together, watching the children grow, maybe having more babies if they were blessed. It should have terrified him. A few months ago, it would have. But now, lying in the darkness of his Wyoming cabin while the woman he loved slept one room away, Darren Hale felt something he hadn't felt in 2 years. Peace. Not the absence of pain. The grief over Emily would always be there, a scar that ached when the weather changed. But the kind of peace that came from knowing you'd found your way through the darkness, that you'd survived the worst and come out the other side with something precious. Outside, the wind still howled. Winter still gripped the land with icy fingers. But inside, the house was warm. The children were safe. And tomorrow Darren would wake up and build a life with a woman who'd shown up on the wrong stage at the wrong time and somehow become exactly right. He fell asleep with Mara's words echoing in his mind. I love you. And his own response, finally spoken after months of silence. I love you too. 3 simple words. But they changed everything. In the morning, they'd start planning a wedding. They'd tell Mrs. Kowalski, who would pretend to be surprised and immediately start organizing everything. They'd find Mara a proper dress, arrange for the preacher, prepare a small celebration. But tonight, right now, it was enough to know that she was staying, that they'd found each other despite everything, that broken things could be repaired and second chances were real, and love didn't always arrive when you expected it. Sometimes it showed up on a stagecoach, wearing someone else's coat, carrying lies that turned into truth. Sometimes it crept up slowly, disguised as practicality and convenience, until one day you looked across the kitchen and realized you couldn't breathe without it. Sometimes it required you to let go of the past before you could grasp the future, but it was always worth it. Always. Darren slept, and in the next room Mara did the same, both of them dreaming of a future that had seemed impossible just hours before, both of them believing finally that they deserved happiness. And in the morning, when Sarah and Thomas burst into their rooms demanding breakfast and asking 1,000 questions about the wedding, both of them would laugh and gather the children close and start building that future, one day at a time. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, the house was quiet. The family was safe, and two broken people had found a way to be whole again, together. Morning came too early and not early enough. Darren woke to the sound of hushed giggling outside his door. He cracked one eye open to find a strip of paper sliding underneath, Sarah's careful handwriting spelling out wedding day with about 17 exclamation points. Not quite. They still had 6 days. But apparently the children had other ideas about timing. He found them in the kitchen with Mara, who looked like she'd been awake for hours. Flour dusted her apron, and the smell of fresh bread filled the cabin. "You're up early," he said. "Couldn't sleep." She didn't look at him, focused intently on kneading dough. Sarah wanted cinnamon rolls for breakfast, special occasion and all. "It's Tuesday." "It's the Tuesday we decided to get married." Sarah bounced in her chair. "That makes it special." Thomas nodded solemnly. "Very special." Darren caught Mara's eye, saw the smile tugging at her lips. "Apparently Tuesdays are special now." "Apparently." She finally looked at him properly, and something passed between them. Awareness. Promise. The slightly terrifying reality that they'd actually done it, committed to this impossible thing. After breakfast, while the children played outside, Darren found Mara scrubbing dishes with more force than necessary. "You're going to wear a hole in that pan." "I'm nervous." She didn't stop scrubbing. "Is that stupid? We already decided. I already said yes, but now it's real and I'm..." "Terrified?" "Yes." She set down the pan finally. "What if I'm not good at being a wife? A real wife, I mean. Not just someone who cooks and cleans." "You've been a real wife for months now. You just didn't have the legal paper to prove it." "That's different. That was temporary. This is forever." He came up behind her, rested his hands on her shoulders. "And that scares the hell out of me too." She turned to face him. "Really? Really? I haven't been a husband in 2 years. Haven't been a good one for longer than that, if I'm honest. Emily and I, toward the end..." He trailed off. "We were solid, but we weren't passionate. We were partners who cared about each other. It was enough. And now? Now, I want more than enough." He touched her cheek. "I want messy and complicated. I want fights and makeups. I want to wake up next to you for the next 40 years and still find new things that drive me crazy." "You're setting the bar pretty low." "I'm being realistic." He kissed her forehead. "We're both broken, Mara. Both carrying damage. This won't be perfect." "I don't need perfect." "Good. Because I can't give you that." He pulled back to look at her. "But I can give you honest. I can give you present. I can give you a man who's trying his damnedest not to screw this up." "That's all I want." She leaned into him. "Just you. Trying. That's enough." They stood like that until Sarah's voice interrupted. "Mrs. Kowalski's here. With fabric." Mara pulled away, eyes wide. "Already? I thought we were going to town tomorrow. You think Mrs. Kowalski would let you go to town for your own wedding dress?" Darren almost smiled. "She probably started sewing the minute she heard the news." He was right. Mrs. Kowalski swept in with an armful of cream-colored silk and enough opinions to fill a barn. No, the waist must be here. You're too thin, we need to add curves. And your hair, we'll need flowers. Real ones, not those sad dried things." She circled Mara like a general planning battle. When is this wedding?
Saturday, Mara said faintly. We thought, Saturday? 5 days. Impossible. Mrs. Kowalski threw up her hands. We need at least 2 weeks for proper wedding. Invitations, food, decorations. We don't need all that, Darren interrupted. Just the preacher and the words. Everything else is extra. Extra, extra. Mrs. Kowalski looked scandalized. This woman waited her whole life to be chosen first. We make it special. Mara's eyes went suspiciously bright. You don't have to... Hush, I'm making dress. Anna Murphy will do food. She owes me favor. The Thompson boys can bring music. We have wedding. She pointed at Darren. You stay out of way. Go fix fence or whatever it is men do. Darren knew when he was beaten. He retreated to the barn, leaving Mara in Mrs. Kowalski's capable, if overwhelming, hands. The next 5 days passed in a blur of activity. Mara was measured, fitted, primped, and fussed over until she looked ready to scream. The cabin was scrubbed within an inch of its life. Sarah practiced walking slowly while scattering imaginary flower petals. Thomas learned to stand still in his Sunday clothes for more than 30 seconds. And Darren tried not to think about everything that could go wrong. You're brooding, Mara said on Thursday night. They were sitting on the porch after the children had finally crashed from exhaustion. I can hear you thinking from here. I'm not brooding. You've been staring at that fence post for 20 minutes. Either you're brooding or you've discovered the secrets of the universe in weathered wood. He almost smiled. What if I mess this up? You will. She said it so matter-of-factly that he turned to stare. You'll mess up. I'll mess up. We'll fight about stupid things and hurt each other's feelings and probably go to bed angry more than once. That's not reassuring. I'm not trying to reassure you. She moved closer, took his hand. I'm trying to be realistic. Marriage isn't some magical thing that fixes broken people. We're still going to be us, damaged and difficult and learning as we go. Then why do it? Because doing it together is better than doing it alone. She squeezed his hand. Because I'd rather fight with you than have peace with anyone else. Because even when it's hard, even when we're both being stubborn idiots, I know you'll still be there in the morning. You sound pretty sure about that. I am. She looked at him steadily. You're a lot of things, Darren Hale. Stubborn, emotionally constipated, terrible at expressing feelings. But you're loyal. Once you commit, you don't quit. It's one of the things I love about you. Emotionally constipated? Would you prefer repressed? I'd prefer you didn't analyze my emotional state at all. Too bad. That's what wives do. She grinned. Get used to it. Friday morning brought unexpected visitors. Darren was splitting wood when he heard horses. He looked up to see 3 riders approaching, and his stomach dropped when he recognized the one in front. Catherine Miller. She looked exactly like her photograph. Middle-aged, practical, riding her horse with competent efficiency. Behind her rode 2 other women, both younger. Darren set down the axe slowly. Mrs. Miller. Mr. Hale. She dismounted stiffly. I apologize for the intrusion. I know I'm not expected, or wanted, probably. That's putting it mildly. He kept his voice level. What are you doing here? Making amends, I hope. She gestured to the women behind her. These are my daughters. They insisted on coming, said I needed to fix what I'd broken. You broke nothing. Mara's here. She's fine. Is she? Catherine's gaze was sharp. Because the last I heard, I'd sent an inexperienced girl into an impossible situation and washed my hands of the consequences. The cabin door opened. Mara emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. She froze when she saw Catherine. Hello, Mara, Catherine said quietly. Mrs. Miller. Mara's voice was carefully neutral. This is unexpected. I'm sure. Catherine approached slowly, like Mara might bolt. I owe you an apology. Several, actually. What I did, sending you in my place, giving you that ticket instead of proper wages, it was cowardly, wrong. You were trying to help. Mara's tone suggested she didn't quite believe it. I was trying to clear my conscience. There's a difference. Catherine looked older in the harsh sunlight, tired. When I decided not to come west, I should have written Mr. Hale immediately, explained the situation. Instead, I took the easy way out and sent you to clean up my mess. It wasn't a mess, wasn't it? Catherine's smile was sad. I failed you, Mara.
As an employer, as a woman who should have known better. You deserved honest wages and a reference letter, not a train ticket to nowhere. Mara was quiet for a long moment. Then, if you hadn't given me that ticket, I wouldn't be here. Wouldn't have met Darren. Wouldn't have the children. She touched the locket at her throat. So maybe it wasn't failure. Maybe it was just the long way to where I needed to be. Catherine's eyes misted. You're kinder than I deserve. Probably, Mara's mouth quirked, but I'm learning that holding on to anger just makes you tired, and I'm tired enough already. One of Catherine's daughters stepped forward. We heard you're getting married. Tomorrow, is that right? Yes. Mara glanced at Darren. Tomorrow afternoon. Then you'll need witnesses and help setting up, if you'll have us. The daughter smiled. Mom was wrong to do what she did, but she raised us to fix our mistakes when we can. Let us help make your wedding day special. Darren saw Mara waver, saw the war in her expression between hurt and hope. All right, she said finally, but I'm doing this for me, not for you. If helping makes you feel better about what happened, fine, but I don't need your guilt or your pity. Understood. Catherine's relief was visible. Thank you, Mara. You won't regret this. We'll see. But Mara's voice had softened slightly. That evening, the cabin was full of women. Catherine's daughters, Anna and Margaret, helped prepare food while Mrs. Kowalski supervised with her usual commanding presence. Catherine herself worked quietly in the corner, hemming Mara's dress with small, precise stitches. Darren retreated to the barn with Thomas, ostensibly to check the animals, but really to escape the estrogen-heavy atmosphere. Papa? Thomas looked up from brushing the horse. Are you scared? About tomorrow? A little. Why? Sarah says brides are always scared, but she didn't say anything about grooms. Grooms are scared too. They just hide it better. Why? Because we're idiots who think showing feelings makes us weak. Darren ruffled his son's hair. Don't do that when you grow up. If you're scared, say so. If you love someone, tell them. Don't wait until they're packing their bags to leave. Thomas absorbed this seriously. Did Mara almost leave? Yeah, buddy, she did. But you stopped her. I did. Good. Thomas went back to brushing. I like her. She makes you smile more. Darren thought about that. Did he smile more? Probably. Mara had a way of catching him off guard, saying things that startled laughter out of him when he wasn't expecting it. I like her too, he said. I know. That's why you're marrying her. Kids. Making everything sound so simple when it was anything but. That night, tradition dictated that Darren and Mara sleep separately. Mrs. Kowalski insisted, saying it was bad luck to see the bride before the wedding. We've been living together for 4 months, Darren pointed out. That was different. That was practical. This is romance. Mrs. Kowalski shooed him toward the door. You sleep in barn tonight. Build character. So Darren found himself bedding down in the hayloft, listening to the wind and thinking about the fact that tomorrow he'd wake up a husband again. The thought should have terrified him, did terrify him, a little. But underneath the fear was something else. Anticipation. The sense that he was standing on the edge of something good instead of something that would break him. Emily's face flashed through his mind. Not accusatory, just present. A memory instead of a ghost. I hope I'm doing right by you, he whispered to the darkness. I hope you understand. No answer came, but Darren hadn't expected one. The dead didn't speak. They just left holes that the living had to figure out how to fill. He was filling his with Mara, with a woman who'd shown up as the wrong person and become exactly right. That would have to be enough. Saturday dawned clear and cold, the kind of Wyoming morning where the air hurt to breathe, but the sky was so blue it didn't seem real. Darren woke to Thomas shaking him. Papa, Papa, wake up! It's wedding day! I'm aware. He sat up, hay in his hair, every muscle protesting. Sleeping in a barn at 43 was even worse than sleeping on the floor. What time is it? Almost 9. Mrs. Kowalski says you need to wash and put on your good clothes. The preacher's coming at noon. Darren hauled himself upright, joints creaking. He'd forgotten how much weddings involved other people having opinions about what you should be doing. Mrs. Kowalski met him at the door with a basin of hot water and a stern expression. You wash. You shave. You make yourself presentable. She thrust a bundle of clothes at him. These are from my late husband. Should fit. Your Sunday clothes have hole in elbow. I can't take your... You can and you will. Mara deserves husband who doesn't look like Scarecrow. She softened slightly. Now go. Make yourself handsome, or at least clean. An hour later, Darren stood in front of the cracked mirror in the barn, barely recognizing himself. The borrowed suit fit surprisingly well. His hair was combed. His face was shaved smooth for the first time in months. He looked like a man getting married. The thought sent butterflies through his stomach. Actual butterflies, like he was 16 instead of 43. Papa? Sarah appeared in the doorway and Darren's breath caught. Someone had put her in a new dress, pale yellow with white ribbons. Her hair was braided with flowers woven through it. She looked so much like Emily that for a moment he couldn't speak. You look beautiful, honey. Mrs. Kowalski made the dress. Do you like it? I love it. He knelt down to her level. Your mama would have loved it too. Sarah's expression turned serious. Are you sad? About Mama Emily? A little. But mostly I'm happy. Is that okay? She considered this. I think Mama would want you to be happy. She was nice like that. Yeah, Darren pulled his daughter close. She was. Do you love Mara like you loved Mama? The question was so direct, so innocent, that Darren had to take a moment before answering. I love Mara differently than I loved your Mama, he said carefully. Not more or less, just different. Does that make sense? I think so. Sarah pulled back to look at him. I love them different too. Mama Emily was warm and soft. Mara is warm but stronger, like she won't break if things get hard. Out of the mouths of babes, again. Exactly like that. The preacher arrived at 12:45, a circuit rider who traveled between settlements, marrying and burying folks as needed. He was old, weathered, with kind eyes and a voice that carried despite his age. Beautiful day for a wedding, he said, shaking Darren's hand. Best we're going to get in February. I've married folks in worse conditions. Did a ceremony in a blizzard once. Could barely hear the vows over the wind. He smiled. This is downright pleasant by comparison. People started arriving around 11:30. Not many. Wyoming was sparsely populated and winter travel was hard. But enough to make it feel like a real celebration. The Thompson boys with their fiddles. Anna Murphy with enough food to feed twice the number of guests. A few neighboring ranch families who'd heard the news and come out of curiosity or kindness or both. Mrs. Kowalski orchestrated everything with military precision, directing people where to stand, where to put food, where not to step because she'd just cleaned that spot. And through it all, Darren waited, nervous, excited, terrified. At noon exactly, the cabin door opened. Mara stepped out and Darren forgot how to breathe. Mrs. Kowalski had transformed the worn silk into something beautiful. The dress was simple, no fuss, no excessive decoration, but it fit Mara perfectly. Her hair was loose for once, falling in dark waves around her shoulders. Someone had woven winter greenery through it, making her look like something out of a fairy tale. But it was her face that stopped him. The joy there. The hope. The absolute certainty in her eyes when they met his. She was choosing him. Actually choosing him. Not settling. Not accepting second best. Choosing. Catherine walked beside her, not giving her away exactly, but offering support. When they reached Darren, she stepped back with a small nod. She's all yours, Catherine said quietly. Treat her well. I will. Mara took his hand and Darren felt the tremor in her fingers. You okay? He murmured. Terrified. You? Same. Good. At least we're equally stupid. The preacher cleared his throat. Shall we begin? What followed was traditional, the words about love and honor, commitment and partnership. Darren had heard them before, at his first wedding. But somehow, they sounded different now. More real, more weighted with meaning. When it came time for vows, the preacher nodded to Darren. He turned to face Mara fully, still holding her hands. I'm not good with words, he started. Never have been. But I'm going to try anyway, because you deserve to hear them. He took a breath. 4 months ago, you stepped off a stage and into my life. You were the wrong woman at the wrong time, and I was too stupid and scared to see what a gift that was. Mara's eyes were already shining with tears. You saved my son. You saved my cow. You saved me, though I didn't know I needed saving. His voice roughened. You took two broken children and a bitter man and made us a family again, not through magic or manipulation, just through being you, through showing up every day and refusing to quit even when I gave you every reason to. Darren,
I'm not done. He squeezed her hands. I promise to choose you every day, even when it's hard, even when we fight, even when you're driving me crazy and I'm being emotionally constipated. That got a watery laugh. I'll still choose you, because you're not my second choice, Mara. You're the only choice, the right choice, the one I should have made the minute you stepped off that stage. Mara was full on crying now. Happy tears, but still. Your turn, Darren said gently. She took a shaky breath. I practiced a speech, wrote it out and everything, but I'm going to ignore it because you just said everything better than I could have. Mara, so I'm going to keep it simple. She looked at him with those brown eyes that had seen too much pain and still held hope. I was lost when I came here, rejected, worthless. I'd convinced myself I was everyone's last resort, and I'd learned to live with that.
Her voice strengthened. But you didn't treat me like a last resort. You treated me like a person, complicated and difficult and worth the trouble. You let me be useful without making me feel used. You gave me space to be myself instead of what everyone else wanted. She touched his cheek. I promise to love you through the grief, through the hard days when you miss Emily, through the moments when you're scared or angry or just need someone to be there. Her thumb brushed his jaw. I promise to be your partner, not your servant. Your equal, not your shadow. And I promise to never ever let you get away with brooding in silence when what you need is to talk. That's going to be annoying. Yes, but you'll survive it. She smiled through tears. I promise to be patient with the children, to honor Emily's memory while making my own place in this family. And I promise to stay, through everything, no matter what. You're stuck with me now. Good. Darren pulled her closer. That's exactly what I want. The preacher was smiling openly now. I believe we can skip straight to the important part. Darren Hale, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. And Mara Ellison, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do. Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The preacher's eyes twinkled. You may kiss your bride, though from the looks of things, you were going to anyway. Darren didn't need to be told twice. He pulled Mara close and kissed her properly, thoroughly, while their guests cheered and the children whooped and Mrs. Kowalski dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Mara whispered, We did it. Yeah, we did. No going back now. Wouldn't want to. The celebration that followed was simple but joyful. The Thompson boys played fiddles while people danced in the yard. Anna Murphy's food disappeared almost as fast as she could set it out. Sarah and Thomas ran wild, hyped up on sugar and excitement, and Darren danced with his wife. Not well, he'd never been graceful, but Mara didn't seem to care. She laughed when he stepped on her foot, let him spin her badly, didn't complain when he held her too close for propriety. What are you thinking? She asked during a slower song. That I'm a lucky bastard. Language, the children, are busy stealing cookies from Mrs. Kowalski's basket. They're not listening. He pulled her closer. I'm thinking about the first day you arrived, how sure I was that you were a mistake, a problem to solve. And now? Now I know you were the solution I didn't know I needed. That's almost poetic for you. Don't get used to it. She laughed and rested her head against his chest, swaying with him to the music. Around them, their friends and neighbors celebrated. Above them, the Wyoming sky stretched endless and blue. It wasn't perfect. The food was running out. The children would crash soon and become cranky. Some of the guests were already leaving, citing the long ride home before dark. But it was real. It was theirs. And that made it better than perfect. As the sun started to set, painting the snow-covered land in shades of gold and pink, Darren found himself standing with Mara on the porch. The party had wound down. Most guests had left. The children were inside with Mrs. Kowalski, being scrubbed clean of cake and dirt. So, Mara said, we're married. Officially. How does it feel? Right. He turned to look at her. Scary. Overwhelming, but right.
Yeah. She leaned against him. I keep waiting for it to feel fake, like I'm playing dress up in someone else's life, but it doesn't. This feels like mine. It is yours. All of it. He wrapped an arm around her waist. The house, the children, me. Even the damn cow. It's all yours now. Romantic. I try. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the last light fade from the sky. Then Mara spoke again, quieter. Can I tell you something? Something I've never told anyone? Anything. When Richard threw me over, I thought about ending it. Not dramatically or anything, just not being here anymore. Her voice was steady but soft. I was so tired of being rejected, of being almost enough but never quite. I thought maybe it would be easier to just stop trying. Darren's arm tightened around her. What stopped you? Stubbornness, mostly. She laughed, but it was edged with old pain. I was so angry that he got to walk away happy while I suffered, so I decided to live just to spite him. Petty, right? Smart. It didn't feel smart. It felt desperate. But it kept me going, kept me putting one foot in front of the other until I ended up on that stage. She turned to face him. So maybe Richard did me a favor. Maybe all the people who rejected me were pushing me toward this, toward you. That's one way to look at it. How do you look at it? Darren thought about Emily dying, about raising the children alone, about writing to Catherine Miller because he was desperate enough to marry a stranger. I think life breaks everyone, he said slowly. Some people stay broken. Some people heal wrong. And some people find someone else who's broken in compatible ways, and they figure out how to be whole together. That's us? Yeah, that's us. Mara kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When she pulled back, she was smiling. So what happens now? Now? He considered. Now we live. We raise the children. We fight occasionally and make up. We survive Wyoming winters and summer droughts. We get old together. Sounds boring. Probably will be sometimes. Good. She took his hand. I'm done with excitement. Give me boring any day. They went inside to find the children already asleep in their beds, exhausted from the day's festivities. Mrs. Kowalski was tidying up, humming to herself. You should go, she said without turning around. Is your wedding night? I'll watch children. You don't have to. I do. Now go. She made shooing motions. I stay tonight. Tomorrow you come get them. Tonight is just for you two. Darren looked at Mara, who shrugged. I'm not arguing with her. She's scary when she's being helpful. They walked out into the cold night toward the barn. Darren had prepared the hayloft earlier, clean blankets, a lantern, enough privacy that they wouldn't be interrupted. It wasn't fancy, wasn't a honeymoon suite in some city hotel, but it was private and warm and theirs. Mara climbed the ladder first, Darren following. At the top, she stopped and looked around at his preparations. You did all this? Mrs. Kowalski helped? Said we needed somewhere quiet for our first night as husband and wife. It's perfect. It's a hayloft. I know. She turned to face him, and it's perfect. What happened next was private, sacred, the kind of thing that belonged only to them. But later, lying tangled together in the blankets with Mara's head on his chest and the lantern burning low, Darren felt something settle in his soul. You awake? Mara murmured. Yeah. What are you thinking about? How different this is from my first marriage. She tensed slightly. Is that bad? No, it's good. He stroked her hair. With Emily, everything was planned, expected. We courted properly, got married in a church with half the county watching. Everything was correct and proper and what we were supposed to do. And with me? With you, nothing's been proper. You showed up uninvited, lied your way into my life, made me fall for you when I was trying my damnedest not to. He felt her smile against his chest. You've been chaos since day one, and I wouldn't change a single thing. Not even the part where I almost left? Especially not that part, because it made me wake up, made me realize what I had before it was too late. Mara was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm glad I came here, even though it wasn't the plan, even though I was terrified and desperate and running from everything I knew. I'm glad the stage brought me to you. Me too.
They lay in silence, listening to the wind outside and the quiet sounds of animals below. Tomorrow they'd go back to being parents and ranchers and all the mundane things that filled a life. But tonight, they were just Darren and Mara, husband and wife, two broken people who'd found a way to be whole. Darren? Mara's voice was drowsy now.
Yeah? Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for being worth choosing.
She fell asleep shortly after, her breathing evening out into the rhythm of dreams. Darren stayed awake a while longer, one hand tangled in her hair, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his ribs. He thought about Sarah's drawing. 4 stick figures holding hands, our family. It was true now, legal and binding and real. They were a family. Unconventional, cobbled together from loss and desperation and stubborn hope. But a family nonetheless.
And maybe that was the lesson in all of this, that families weren't always born. Sometimes they were built, piece by piece, choice by choice, day by day. Sometimes the wrong person showed up at the wrong time and turned out to be exactly right. Sometimes second chances were better than first ones because you knew what you had, knew what you'd almost lost. Sometimes love arrived quietly, disguised as convenience and practicality, and you didn't realize it was love until you were already drowning in it. Darren had drowned, willingly, gratefully, and he'd surface tomorrow morning next to a woman who'd chosen him back, who'd stayed when leaving would have been easier, who'd looked at his broken family and decided it was worth fixing. Outside, the Wyoming night was cold and dark and endless. But inside the barn, wrapped in blankets with his wife sleeping beside him, Darren Hale was warm. He was home. And for the first time in 2 years, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. He closed his eyes and let sleep take him, dreaming of a future that looked nothing like the past. A future with Mara's laughter filling the cabin, with children growing strong and healthy, with a ranch that thrived because there were 2 sets of hands working it instead of one. A future built on honest love instead of convenient arrangement. A future that started now. Tonight. With a woman who'd stepped off a stage 4 months ago and changed his entire world. The wrong bride. Who turned out to be exactly right. And in the morning, when they walked back to the house hand in hand to collect their children and begin their real life together, Darren would look at Mara, his wife, his partner, his choice, and know with absolute certainty that he was the luckiest man in Wyoming, maybe the luckiest man alive. Because sometimes, when you stop trying to control everything, when you let go of fear and grief and the weight of the past, life surprised you. It sent you what you needed instead of what you asked for. It sent you Mara, and that made all the difference.